Meeting to order. Welcome, everyone, to our May 5th meeting of the Town Council. We'll start, as we always do, with the roll call.
Thank you and good evening. Councilmember Marika Sayak.
Here.
Councilmember Steve Leonardis.
Here.
Councilmember Rob Rennie.
Here.
Vice Mayor Barbara Spector.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Marcia Jensen.
Here. Next item on our agenda is our Pledge of Allegiance, and we are always lucky to have somebody from our community to come up and help lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And tonight we have George Ross. George, will you come up, please? So I had an opportunity to talk to George a little bit just now. George is a 5th grader at Van Meter. He loves Taekwondo, and he enjoys hip-hop dancing with his boys' hip-hop class, which is pretty cool. The more interesting thing that we talked about was that he went on a vacation, or a trip, I should say, with his family for 7 months across the United States in an RV. And I said, George, you're in 5th grade. How did you take a trip for 7 months? And his answer was homeschooling. But he told me that maybe he didn't get quite enough math in on his homeschooling. But of traveling all the way across the United States and visiting national parks and presidential libraries and what else? All kinds of monuments. While he did enjoy Yellowstone, which he got confused with Yosemite because they both start with a Y, but Yellowstone, he remembered, was in Wyoming. His very favorite thing on that entire 7 months was beignets in New Orleans. So it's a kid after my own heart. And so, George, thank you very much. Will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Let's have a round of applause for George. Okay, again, thank you very much, George. And you may stay or not for the rest of the meeting as you choose. The next thing that we're going to do is I'm going to come down and hand out a proclamation. And if any of you watch these on TV or come to them, you'll begin to wonder if the only person or entity I give proclamations to is Matt Morley. So Matt Morley, come on up here. This is actually National Public Works Week. Matt is our Director of Parks and Public Works, and so in my capacity as mayor, I've declared it National Public Works Week. And this theme in Los Gatos this year is Community Begins Here. And Matt has been working really hard to make sure that Public Works gets out there in our community with some great events. Our tree planting, our opening of the green bike lanes, he participates in Safe Routes to School, all kinds of things that PBW is doing for us. So community does begin here, and so get to know them. And congratulations for Public Works Week. And you've probably got some things happening at the yard that we should know about.
Thank you very much. Just briefly, May 20th, we'll have an open house at the yard in the morning if you're interested. 41 Miles Avenue, right by the baseball field, Balzer Field. Drop by and take a look at all the things that Public Works does for the town.
Thank you, Matt. Matt also moves the portable podium for us. Next on our agenda is our council matters. This is the time in the meeting where members of the council can report to each other and to you on what we've been doing outside of these meetings in our capacity as representatives of the town. And so, Councilman Rennie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've actually been on vacation since the morning of our last council meeting until last night, so I did absolutely nothing for the town.
That's okay. You get a break every once in a while. Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Along with the mayor, we had a policy committee meeting, and we continued to review the huge amount of work that we're finding we have to do and prioritizing it for going forward.
And that is actually what I did as well. Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. I have nothing to report on any of my council appointments, but I just wanted to say thank you to one of our newest businesses in town, Jersey Mike's Sandwich Shop. They've been in business for about a week, and they have raised $3,000 in their first week that they are giving to our local schools, Lee High School and Los Gatos High School. So I thought that was really neat that their first week of business that they are already giving back to our community.
Councilman Sayak.
Thank you. On, I think, April 23, I attended the ABAG, Association of Bay Area Government General Assembly meeting. I'm the representative for that. The primary purpose of that meeting was to look at the budget and work plan for the upcoming year and gain approval. There is a budget increase. This will be coming to the full council's review, I believe, when our entire budget comes, and that's to accommodate the cost of living increase as well as population increase. But prior to that, we had a great conversation where the regional housing number allocations and its impact to small towns was discussed and discussed over time so that we actually lost a quorum and was not able to talk about, to actually vote on the budget. So that will be coming in an upcoming meeting.
Thank you very much. Are there any manager matters tonight?
Just one brief one. Being a bit of an amateur photographer, I wanted to acknowledge what you have in here as part of your art in the council chambers. It's by the Los Gatos Saratoga Camera Club, and this will be in here from May 1st to July 30th. And take a close look because there's some real quality photography in here, and I should know that because it's so much better than mine. And I really was looking at some and was amazed by it. There's a reception that the Camera Club's going to have here in the council chambers from 6 to 7:30 p.m. on May 7th. So if you have any time at all, you'll want to stop by for that reception. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. White. Next thing on our agenda is our consent calendar. The consent calendar consists of items that where staff has determined for reasons of they're not controversial or they're not complex or they're something that are more routine that we can handle in a number of items in a single motion. That we have 6 on tonight, but that said, anyone in the council or the public can pull any of those items from the consent calendar, and if you do, we'll hear it in its normal course. So anyone on the council want to pull an item from consent? Anyone from the public want to pull an item from our consent calendar? I see no one. Is there a motion? Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. I move to approve consent items 1 through 6, inclusive of the desk items.
Seconded by the Vice Mayor. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. Okay. Then before we move on to our regular calendar, we do have a portion of the meeting where called verbal communications, where anyone who is in the audience who wants to talk to the council about something that is not on tonight's agenda has an opportunity to do that, and you can talk to us for 3 minutes. I have 2 cards. The first is from Camille, and I'm going to say this wrong, Athern, come on up. You go right here, and I'll say this for everyone. If you're going to come up and speak tonight, there's lights that are going to be to your right. Green light means you're fine. The yellow light means you have 30 seconds left, and the red light means that you're all done. And I will be watching those lights, and I'll let you finish up your last thoughts, but I will actually very politely tell you that your time is up if you start to go over. So, Miss.
6 minutes, and I cut it in half. So I'll try my best.
Okay.
With a simple request, I'm asking the council to allow me to tie lime green ribbons around town for Lyme Awareness, which is the month of May. I'm here tonight on behalf of my family and all the millions of people who suffer from chronic Lyme disease, a disease that has always been ignored by most of the medical community and one that up until just a couple of years ago was barely talked about or acknowledged. I've spent the past 19 years of my life taking care of someone in my family, every single day for 19 years. Not 1, not 2, but 3 of my family members have this devastating disease. Throughout these years, I have watched in horror my eldest daughter suffer, then a few years later, my husband, and months after that, my middle daughter. All three of them have chronic Lyme disease and co-infections. All three are still fighting to be well. No one should have to live this way, and you would be surprised how many people in the Bay Area do. We know because we've met thousands of other people who suffer from Lyme when we go to our weekly doctor's appointments. We are not the only family or people in Los Gatos who suffer this. Our community needs to learn about this disease, and awareness needs to be embraced as soon as possible. For the past 2 years, I've received calls or emails once a month regarding advice or information about Lyme, which has now increased to once or twice a week. I started learning early on, once we figured out what we had, that almost everyone we share our story with knows of someone who has it or has had it. We've also met people who have actually lost loved ones due to this disease as well because of misdiagnosis and discovering it was Lyme too late. Everyone's stories are pretty much the same: tragic, devastating, and incomprehensible. And everyone agrees if there were more public awareness and education about the disease, we wouldn't have an epidemic on our hands. With all that I have seen and observed with this illness, I know that it is vitally important to bring consciousness to our community and showing them that a family is fighting for their lives and so many others are suffering as well. So our family is hosting a Lyme awareness event at the Los Gatos Theater on May 21st. Whether the medical community wants to accept it or not, this is not going away but becoming more evident every day. A sense of urgency is an understatement. As recent studies have shown, Lyme-infected ticks have been found in every country in California except San Francisco. This will be an epidemic bigger than the world has ever seen. Over the past couple of years, the CDC has admitted being wrong about the number of people who have it. This is a moral and ethical issue that needs to be addressed. I feel it is my duty and obligation to do whatever I can to educate and bring awareness to a disease. If treated immediately and for the proper amount of time, your chances of having symptoms later decrease significantly. I don't want anyone to suffer what my family has had to suffer. I am pleading for you to recognize the importance of this issue and allow me to hang my ribbons in honor of all the people who are affected. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thurn. Vice Mayor Spector has a question.
Thank you. In addition, or maybe it's other than hanging the ribbons, is there any input that you could give us as to what could be done to minimize or eradicate or deal with this issue?
Well, I was happy. I heard that on the trail that there's a sign now that says it. But I don't know. I've been so inundated for so long, and we are bringing the documentary Under Our Skin to the Los Gatos Theater, and the director of the movie is going to do a Q&A after.
Thank you.
You have another question. Councilman Rennie.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is, for the ribbons that you're requesting, how large are they? What do they look like? Where would you put them?
I would like to put them in downtown, the downtown area. It could be as little as 6 to more. I mean, I would like more. And then we live in Blossom Manor behind Whole Foods. And if we could do some down there, that would be great.
And how large are the ribbons? Like the size on your shirt or bigger or?
Well, on our house right now, we've probably cut ones like that, and then we've tied them around our poles. So at this point, I just want lime green to be a start, and if they're small, that's fine, but I would just love to have something showing it.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Cheryl Jensen.
Madam Mayor and City Council, today I bring to you the notice of determination for the negative declaration for the Highway 85 expansion. The Highway 85, as you know, is filled up with choke points and it doesn't move. But it doesn't move because it isn't wide. It doesn't move because it's got all these choke points. So this project is going to build in several more and make it just impossible because you can't expand Highway 85 beyond Stevens Creek going north, and because there isn't room. And they're going to try to expand it in our area through the West Valley, and everybody will just come to a stop. And it's got toll lanes planned, 2 toll lanes. 2 of the 4 lanes that will be there are going to be toll lanes. And what that means is more choke points because people will be merging into the toll lanes at specific places with not enough room. And so the thing is a disaster. The negative declaration does not admit the additional noise. It doesn't admit the discouragement of carpools and the discouragement of electric vehicles because they're going to fill up the lane with Lexus and all the other expensive cars that are coming from the south. So the negative declaration notice of determination was filed on April 29th. This is it. This is a certified copy, and it's for your attorney. I hope you'll join the other West Valley cities and say, we have a contract that prevented them from doing this, and we want to stand by our contract, and we feel like the negative declaration is not honest. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jensen. Councilman Leonardis has a question for you.
Well, I have a question for staff in general. I know in the past this issue has been raised about a year ago, and it sounds like now that the ball is moving forward on it, I think I'd like to know what steps our staff is going to be taking moving forward to address this, and who will be assigned to it.
My impression, and Matt Morley's here, is that this is a matter that the Traffic and Parking Commission will be taking up. And then I believe from there, it would need to come back here to the council for the council to consider this matter, which I know has been out there since I was town manager on an interim basis the first time. So it may be that the council will need to consider the input from the commission, weigh the facts, and determine whether or not you will be taking any particular position on this. Mostly what I've heard have been rumors about things that have been said. I know that the mayor and Matt Morley have attended meetings where there have been some discussions of this by VTA staff and by other parties of interest. So I would imagine it will get back here in short order.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White. Let me just follow up with Mr. Morley. Does the Transportation and Parking Commission actually have this on its agenda?
I meet with the chair of the Transportation and Parking Commission tomorrow morning to set the next agenda, which is a week from Thursday, and my intent is to recommend that this be one of the items on the agenda.
Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is for staff also, probably for the town attorney. The speaker said that the negative declaration was, I'm going to use the word issued, April 30th. If a jurisdiction, i.e. the town, wanted to challenge that negative declaration, do we have to get the issue before the court in a certain time frame, for example, 1 month?
Yes.
The answer is yes.
Yes.
Okay. And then
and I'm not sure. I mean, it's been issued, but I don't know if they've taken action yet on it. If it's been set for a certain date or not, I don't know if that's been done yet.
All right. So then, if the town wanted to weigh in on the negative declaration in a timely fashion, would the issue have to come back before us at our next meeting or in a closed session since it involves litigation?
I'm not sure it involves litigation. The issue is whether you want to challenge or put in any comments to the negative declaration. So I'm not sure I would schedule it in closed session yet, maybe after the fact that we even want to get involved in it. So the first preliminary issue is whether you want to get involved in the issue of whether the negative declaration is insufficient or not. That's the main issue, which is separate and apart from the issue of our contract that we have with them and their commitments on that. That's a separate issue that might be a litigation item, but just the issue of whether the negative declaration is insufficient and there should have been a mitigated negative deck or a EIR is an issue that can be discussed in public.
All right, Madam Mayor, this one council person thinks it's a sufficiently significant issue for this council to discuss in a timely fashion, although I don't know what that timely fashion is, but it looks like it's the next meeting.
So thank you. Before I respond and call on anyone else, does anyone have a question for Ms. Jensen because she's standing at the podium? If not, I'm going to let her sit down. You do have a question? Steve, you have a question for Ms. Jensen?
Yes. Ms. Jensen, I understand that the Cupertino City Council hosted a hearing on this the other night. Is that correct? Were you in attendance at that?
No, I wasn't. I was gone over the weekend, so as soon as I found out about this Monday morning, I went and got the notice of determination. Now, that April 29th gives you to May 29th to challenge the negative declaration. You already wrote a letter last year. This council already did that. And so they haven't done an environmental impact report. There is nothing but this negative declaration. There isn't any noise mitigation. There is nothing in it. And they'll just go ahead and build if we don't do something. Now, I'm from Saratoga. We're trying to get our council to go ahead with a suit. We did an extensive comment on the negative declaration last February, a year ago last February. The negative declaration gives us nothing. In other words, all the noise that we hear now is going to be probably doubled. Yeah.
Madam Mayor, a follow-up question. So you said you received a notice of determination. Did you receive that from your city of Saratoga, or?
No. The notice of determination is filed with the recorder, the clerk recorder of Santa Clara County when they do an environmental document. Okay. And this is the certified copy of that. So this gives you the exact timeline that you have.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so before I call on Councilman Rennie, is your question for staff or for Ms. Jensen? Okay, thank you, Ms. Jensen. Councilman Rennie. Let's let Mr. Rennie ask his question first.
So my understanding is the VTA board is going to be discussing this on Thursday. I think we should be aware of what transpires during that. I was going to try to go, but I've got some conflicts. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to go to that meeting or not. So I don't know if that's a question as much as information.
I think that's an information item. So the Vice Mayor would like to have this matter come back to us on our agenda. Councilman Leonardis, are you going to say that you would like to? And Councilwoman Sayak is nodding her head, and Councilman Rennie is nodding his head. So I will be meeting with Mr. White tomorrow to develop the agenda. We will discuss when it's appropriate for it to go on, and I'm sure the clerk will get that notice to Mr. Schultz for evaluation for us to talk about when it's appropriate, but we'll get it scheduled when it's correct to do so that any action we take can be effective. Councilwoman Sayak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just so I understand the process, I understand that Transportation and Parking Commission may be reviewing this, or at least you'll be bringing this to the chair's attention. Does it make sense to have whatever they discuss, at least minutes of that meeting, be forwarded to us so that we understand what at least they've looked at and what concerns they may have brought forward?
We can certainly do that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I have another card for verbal communications, John Shepherdson. Thank you, Ms. Jensen.
Madam Mayor, John Shepherdson. First, congratulations, Matt, on the award. Secondly, Ms. Athern, perhaps if you could provide some statistics or maybe something to the town, maybe something could be posted on the website. Those are suggestions. Thirdly, I would like to know if we could get maybe some feedback on, maybe from staff on the green bike lanes. I would offer an award to Rob Rennie for like biker of the week award for showing up at the ribbon cutting with a fractured rib, as I understand it. Next point, these shoes are from a little business here in town called Alluring Attire. It's at 59 North Santa Cruz Avenue. And I just offer it because it's something about Los Gatos that's unique. You won't find this in maybe a large, big box store. Next point I want to make is it's sort of a visual here with a pie, pumpkin pie. And our police budget is about 41.1% of our budget. And Cupertino's is about 8% of their budget. And I know it's kind of maybe comical, but it's a serious point because I'm trying to, and I and Barbara Holden are trying to find out why there's such a big delta, and does that delta justify the expenditure that we're making? And I've made requests to council for the town, and I've gotten some information, but some information I haven't. And from our point of view, the delta that exists between us and Saratoga on the expenditure side is $7 million. If we compare us to Cupertino, which has about double our population, the delta on the expenditure side is $4.3 million. And so we haven't seen a justification for not at least considering switching to the sheriff. So I would suggest that we, and I would ask it be put on the agenda, that we have a comprehensive review of our police department and compare us to the sheriff. And it's really a no-lose situation because someone like Management Partners can come in and they routinely find efficiencies. And certainly they're going to find at least 100 to 150,000 in efficiencies. So we're not really going to lose any money, and we have a chance to really find efficiencies. So whether we go with the sheriff or if we stay with our own police department and use more CSOs, and this is not an attack on a police department. I would make this request if we were dealing with some other department, because the delta is so big and we could use these monies for other things in town. Last point, I would suggest Tom O'Donnell has something to say with respect to the width of the streets in the Almond Grove, and our narrowing them is a question that I think is worthy of looking at. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We're going to move on to our regular agenda. And before I do that, I have taken the time to ask everyone to silence their devices. You can use your device, but please silence it. And then the way we're going to run our public hearings is that we'll have a presentation from staff or on one of our items, a staff equivalent. And the council will ask questions. After the questions are answered, we'll call up any member of the public that wants to talk to us about that item. And if you want to talk, you can fill out one of these cards, which you'll find in the seat backs that are in front of you. And I use that to call your name, and we put your comments and your name on our record. And you have 3 minutes to speak. The council may or may not ask you questions, so please don't run away until we figure out whether or not there are any questions for you. After that, we'll close the hearing, and the council will then attempt to reach a decision on the matter. So that's how we're going to go tonight. But the first thing I'm going to do is call something out of order, and that is item number 9, agenda item number 9, which is architecture and site application S-14-072, which is project location 15343 Santella Court, which is an appeal from the Planning Commission by Dr. David Weissman. The council received an email this morning from Dr. Weissman indicating that he believed that there was not an adequate exchange of documents for him to be allowed to go ahead with his presentation properly. So we've received an addendum that I think everyone has from staff recommending that we consider whether we want to continue this item. So I will look to council to see if there is a motion, in fact, to continue this. Vice Mayor Spector.
Madam Mayor, thank you. I have a question first. This is an appeal, and since it is now on our agenda as a hearing, is that sufficient to address the timelines and limitations on appeals?
Yes. Yes, it specifically says that just the hearing has to be open by that day. It doesn't say it has to be completed. So we are having the hearing scheduled today, and a continuance can be part of that.
And what we've done so far is having it opened.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Okay, any other questions or a motion? Okay, I'm going to make a motion. Given the communication that we received and the recommendation we have from staff, out of an abundance of caution to make sure that all parties to this matter believe that they've gotten a full and complete hearing, I am going to move that we continue this matter to a date certain of May 19th, 2015. And since the basis for the request for the continuance was an assertion that there was not sufficient time and proper exchange of documents, part of my motion will be to close the period where any documents can be submitted to the council on May 11th of 2015, close of business. That's my motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Leonardis. Any discussion? Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A question. I am assuming, but I need to ask, that during this period of time from now till whatever the mayor said, May 11th, that there will be no construction on site? I guess that would be a question for staff.
That is correct. This is a planning appeal, and until the planning appeal is resolved, no building permits can be issued.
And also, just sort of an aside, I'm going to, at our next policy committee meeting, I may suggest that we revisit the deadlines for submitting documents to the council. And I will be supporting the motion. Did anybody second it yet?
It's been seconded by Councilman Leonardis, and as to your comment for the policy committee, as the other member of the policy committee, I would be delighted to reconsider the submission deadlines. Any other comments or questions on the motion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. It passes unanimously. We will see you back, those of you who are interested, on May 19th. Those of you from Devidon, thank you for coming. I hope you understand the reason for the continuance, and we will see you on May 19th. So now we're going to go back to our regular order. And call item number 7, which asks us to consider an ordinance amending our town code section 18.60.010 and 18.60.015 to regulate e-cigarettes and vaping in the same manner that we regulate tobacco products. So welcome Shamik, Jane, and other members of the Los Gatos Youth Commission. Thank you for coming. And I'm sorry, I've already forgotten your name. Jamie Matthews. Is that right? Jamie Fields, sorry. To talk to us about this item. So Shamik.
Hi, I'm Shamik, and I'm representing the Los Gatos Youth Commission. The Los Gatos Youth Commission recommends introducing an ordinance amending town code that would regulate electronic smoking devices and all nicotine delivery devices in the same way as traditional tobacco products in the town of Los Gatos. Electronic cigarettes, or e-cigs, have become increasingly popular among adults and youth alike in the community over the last several years. Nicotine is a powerful pharmacologic agent that affects the brain. At least 10 chemicals listed as carcinogens and reproductive toxins have been identified in mainstream or secondhand e-cigarette aerosol. The purposes of the current Municode regarding smoking in public places and places of employment are to protect the public health and to guarantee the right of non-smokers to breathe smoke-free air. With the emergence of e-cigarettes in the last few years, the current purposes of the Municode are not resolved, and therefore the Los Gatos Youth Commission recommends adopting an ordinance for amending the town code to regulate e-cigarettes in the same way as traditional tobacco products. Also, the Youth Commission requests that we be granted permission to utilize $1,000 in order to notify the public of the ordinance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jane. Let me see if there's any questions for you. Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. Mr. Jane, one thought that I had was, is $1,000 sufficient for you to get your message out to the public about this new ordinance?
We think that would be well sufficient because we're planning on notifying our youth-friendly businesses by writing letters and also using small decals to put hopefully in town public places like the library and this building and other public places like that. So $1,000 should be sufficient.
All right, thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Jane? Councilwoman Sayak.
Thank you for bringing this ordinance to us. A question that I had is, if approved, it would be, the ordinance would be specific to public places. Did the Youth Commission look at options to help the schools and the school districts regulate it on campus?
So the school district already has taken a stance against e-cigarettes, and they have already included that in their policies.
Okay.
It's the town ordinance that's not been
Great.
amended yet.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Jane? Thank you very much for your presentation. We appreciate it. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I have a card from a member of the public, Dr. David Weissman.
Dave Weissman. The first question is, should we do this? Definitely yes. The science is now clear. E-cigarettes are not benign, and their use is increasing among adolescents. The second question is, when should we do this? Today, or even better, yesterday. Heck, New Orleans recently banned cigarettes and e-cigarettes from all indoor places, including bars. New Orleans. Don't wait for the state. Local jurisdictions led the way in California in the 1990s on indoor smoking bans, and then the state played catch-up. Plus, Big Tobacco wants to keep this fight with e-cigarettes in Sacramento, where their resources are most effective. All politics are local. The third question is, should Los Gatos update our smoking policies? Another big yes. In 1991, Los Gatos was one of the first 5 municipalities in California to enact a smoke-free indoor work policy. We received A's from the American Lung Association then, but we've done nothing since, and now we get D's and F's. It's time for us to again step up to the plate and revise our outdated smoking ordinance to match the protections seen in Campbell and Palo Alto, among others. I'm tired of getting failing grades.
Thank you, Dr. Weissman. You have a question. Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. Dr. Weissman, I may be putting you on the spot, but being that you're a longtime Los Gatos resident and you've been around our town, what recommendations or ideas do you have to better improve our existing smoking ordinances?
The first thing I would do is start with what some of the communities have done around here. You go over to the prune yard, there's the whole area now the whole outdoor area is non-smoking now when you're within 25 feet of a doorway, a window. Palo Alto has had that for a long time. All you have to do is walk down Main Street, downtown Los Gatos, and as you go by the bars, as you go by the various places, you're exposed to cigarette smoke. We've just grown up with it, and we don't think that much about it. But cigarette smoke, secondhand cigarette smoke, is a Class A carcinogen, which means there is no safe level of exposure. Sure, you're not going to get cancer, lung cancer, the first time you inhale a little bit of secondhand cigarette smoke, but it is cumulative. And I think people have the right to walk around doing their daily activities and not be exposed to cigarette smoke. If you were walking down Los Gatos Boulevard and someone said, oh, there's asbestos here, we'd all hightail it. Asbestos and secondhand cigarette smoke are both Class A carcinogens. They should be treated the same.
Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else want to talk to us about a proposed modification to our smoking regulation? Okay, seeing no one, I'm going to close the public hearing and look to the council for questions of staff or a motion. Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. Looking at our smoking ordinance, it was written a long time ago, and I noticed some things in there that may not be applicable. Looking at the last page, there's quite an extensive reference to cigarette vending machines, and I believe those were federally outlawed in 2010. And I was wondering if that language is still necessary to be incorporated into our ordinance, or if it, being that this is an opportunity to update it, if it would be wise to remove that or whatnot.
Can you give us a page reference?
Yes, I can. It's the last page of the document that says Article 6, Smoking Regulations. We have 1, 2, 3, the fourth page. And if you go to right under where it says subparagraph A, the second paragraph, the town finds that the availability of cigarettes and then tobacco products marketed through vending machines promotes the use of tobacco products among minors. That is probably true, but I think vending machines have been completely outlawed. So I'm not trying to be nitpicky here, but it is one of those things where it goes kind of on and on. Below the paragraph B there, the end of the paragraph, it talks about, vending machines being limited in transportation areas, restaurants, bars, combinations, et cetera, et cetera. So I was looking at that language thinking, I don't know if it's applicable anymore or what. So that was my significant change. In addition to that, I noticed that the fee was $100, or the fine or the penalty was $100 in 2 locations. It's paragraph G on page 3, and then subparagraph C on the last page, page 4. And I was wondering if that fine being established in 1992 when this was written of $100 was significant by today's standards to be a deterrent, or if that fine should be increased. And those are my comments so far.
So I'm going to ask Mr. Schultz to at least address the $100 fine issue, if not the vending machine issue that was raised by Councilman Leonardis.
So for this project, it was brought forth by the Youth Commission, and really their goal was just to tackle the issue of e-cigarettes. We didn't look at the other issues that have been brought up by Councilmember Leonardis regarding the vending machines. Yes, I believe that is federal law. I think it was 1995 that they're not allowed. It's not in contradiction to that, so it's the same. So yes, we could remove it. We could do a more cleanup, depending on council's recommendations. Also was whether you wanted to come back and look at other issues that were brought up by Dr. Weissman. I've done extensive research on that and done ordinances for a number of cities in the Central Coast area that go to those other levels of not allowing it on the sidewalks, to not allowing it even in residential units. That's where you'll see a lot of it happening now, that they're not even allowed in apartment buildings. So there's our regulations you can do. So as far as cleanup, yes, there probably is. As in any sections, there's cleanup to do, and fines need to be looked at, but we didn't look at it in preparation for this one.
So if the council wanted to take action on what's before it tonight, it could do so and then could ask for a return evaluation of the entire ordinance structure?
Exactly, with some guidance on what areas you wanted us to look at.
Okay. Other questions, comments, or a motion? Councilwoman Sayoc.
I'm ready to make a motion.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
And do you have the handout we
Yes,
got?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Schultz. I do move for introduction and first reading of the ordinance by number and title only, amending Los Gatos Town Code Section 18.60.010 and Section 18.60.015 to regulating electronic smoking products as recommended by the Youth Commission. And I also direct staff to bring back additional non-smoking provisions to address smoking distances from building entrances and other circumstances, and doing an overall refresher and cleanup of our existing smoking ordinances.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second? Councilman Leonardis?
I'd like to second the motion. I'd also like to know if the maker of the motion would be, and you kind of covered it generally in your motion, but a refresher of some smoking ordinances, things such as a cigarette seller's permit, things such as smoking in attached rental units that Attorney Mr. Schultz referred to, and as well as our outdoor seating areas in our restaurants. So if that fits within the generality of your motion. I'm glad to second your motion.
Yes, and yes, it does. And just to further be specific, a refresher based on what is current federal law as well as state law, as well as what some of our neighboring jurisdictions are currently doing.
So Councilman Leonardis, do you have a second to that motion?
Yes.
Comments or questions on the motion? Councilman Rennie.
My question is, the Youth Commission seems to be asking for $1,000. Do we need to vote on that also? Where would that money come from?
That money comes from the manager's contingency fund, and the manager has authority to issue those funds. And you're going to be taking an action here, so it'd be clear that that's the direction from the council, and there's adequate funds in that account.
So Councilwoman Sayak, do you want to include a direction in your motion?
Yes, further specific direction that the $1,000 as requested by the Youth Commission will also be funded.
Councilman Leonardis?
Second.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on the motion? Okay, I'm going to call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Congratulations, Youth Commission. Thank you for your good work on this.
Excuse me, Mayor. I need to read the title of the ordinance.
Please do.
This is an ordinance of the Town of Los Gatos amending Town Code Section 18.60.010 and 18.60.015 to regulate electronic smoking products and all nicotine delivery devices in the same way as traditional tobacco products within the Town of Los Gatos.
Thank you, Ms. Neese. Our next item is item number 8, which I'm just going to call a water conservation item, which has a number of recommendations, including the adoption of an urgency ordinance. Mr. Morley.
And while Mr. Morley is getting prepared, I just wanted to make a couple of brief comments on this report. We recognize in giving it to you that this is a work in progress, and that what we're really looking for will be discussion by the council and any further direction or confirmation of some of the directions that we've offered you. We would be coming back with a work plan of the items that you identify, plus we would anticipate giving you periodic updates as well on this subject, which will be a continuing and moving target, I think, for the town as it is for a number of other jurisdictions.
Mr. White, let me just follow up before I call on Mr. Morley. That said, I'm assuming that the recommendation is for an action on the proposed urgency ordinance, correct?
Yes. Everything we've put in here as recommendations, we would urge action on those. We would also urge that if you have other items you want us to look at, we will do that. And the point of my comment was that we know that this isn't just a one-shot deal from the staff.
Thank you. Mr. Morley.
Thank you very much. Acknowledging out of the gate that this is a partnership effort amongst many town employees and also our partners outside of the town, some of whom are here tonight helping and who have fed information into the report. So with us from San Jose Waters, Kurt Elvert, Rachel Gibson is here from the Water District, Diana Abadi is here from the Los Gatos Union School District, and Stephen Ma from Los Gatos Saratoga Rec. So a great partnership and many people that have fed into the effort. Just a quick summary of where we stand. Our rainfall is at a four-year deficit of about 24.5 inches. Our snowpack is 2% of average this year, very low. And our groundwater, which is the go-to in this area, is 39 feet lower than the 5-year average. And our imported water allocation continues to drop and is 14% lower than last year. This chart is intended to show where or what we would need in terms of rain in order to make up that delta, that lack of water that we've experienced. On the left slide, it shows that we would need 166% of precipitation to get out of the bottom 20th percentile, so a big year just to get out of that 20th percentile. And then on the right, 240% of precipitation is necessary to get to the 50th percentile. We've had mixed results on our activities townwide. We asked San Jose Water to run the report on the 4 town zip codes and what the water savings were for those 4 zip codes. That savings came in at a 9% number in comparison with a 13% for San Jose Water's total savings amount. On the positive side, the town savings and our efforts internally have achieved a 25% savings in our top 10 municipal accounts. I think that's a big savings and attributed to the hard work of town staff in making that happen. As you may have heard, San Jose Water's target of 20% for the coming year, and that's designated by the governor's office, and I'll capture more of that in a few seconds here. Some of the questions that come up are what are others doing? The big player is the State Water Resources Control Board. They're in 2 days of meetings, including today and tomorrow, that will set regulations and provide guidance for the state. So as the town manager mentioned in the start of the presentation, this is an ongoing conversation, and we expect the requirements in the situation to change continually. San Jose Water is our water retailer. They provide water to many jurisdictions, including Los Gatos, and we get our water in Los Gatos exclusively from San Jose Water. And the Santa Clara Valley Water District is a partner that brings in water from external sources and provides water to San Jose Water. They're also a big player in the education and outreach side. We provided you some information in the addendum from Campbell and what they're doing, so that gives you an idea of the actions that other jurisdictions are taking. Largely, we're aligning with other activities within the state. We have been participating in a listserv that's statewide that provides information on what other organizations are doing or what the discussions are statewide. They, as you can imagine, vary very greatly with some that are fairly straightforward, and a lot of jurisdictions are looking to the State Water Resources Control Board for guidance and the most specific of guidelines. I'd also like in reaching out to the school districts, both the high school and Los Gatos Union School District have plans for conserving water, and they are intending on meeting the targets that are set forward as well. So what are these targets and what are all these numbers that are out there? The 20% is a state mandated target for San Jose Water. This is based on the amount of use per population and provides guidance based on Los Gatos and San Jose Water's usage, not specific to Los Gatos, but San Jose Water in aggregate. There's a 25% call for reduction aggregate statewide by the governor's office, and this number varies from location to location. So for instance, Morgan Hill, who has a higher per capita usage, has a higher target than San Jose Water does. And in addition, Santa Clara Valley Water District has asked for a 30% reduction in the Bay Area, and this is largely because of our reliance on the underground aquifers for our water supply. And historically, 40% of our water has come from those sources. You can imagine as our allocation from other state resources, including snowpack, decreases, that we have to get our water from somewhere else, and that becomes the go-to for our water supply. So then we get into some of the questions of what can we do in Los Gatos. The first area is leading by example. I think we started that last year when we implemented our own reductions and achieved the 25% number. It often means a trade-off between quality of life and conservation. So where does it make sense to turn parks brown and to provide to balance that with providing a resource for the public to use that space? You can say the same for many of our facilities, including the Town Plaza Fountain. One of the things we're asking tonight, as you're aware, is to adopt an ordinance to support the conservation with a number of recommendations that have been outlined for you, both in this report and the staff report that you have. The biggest, as I started out, is our partnership with other agencies. The West Valley cities can come together as a strong voice, as we do in many situations, and there might be a great opportunity there for a partnership. San Jose Water is a great partner in terms of enforcement and making sure that water conservation is happening, and they've taken on that role. And the Santa Clara Valley Water District has a significant role in the education and outreach area and are a leader for the area in that. Our recommendations in the staff report stay aligned with this model as we have it now, and certainly we're looking for further discussion with the council on this as we go forward. We also are asking in our staff report for a set aside of $65,000 to address some of the actions that we need to take in order to continue to conserve water. These actions may include continuing outreach to the extent that the town needs to take a role there, replacing plumbing fixtures. We have a good number of low-flow plumbing fixtures throughout the town, but we'd like to go through and make sure that all of them are in that ultra-low-flow mode so that we save water there. We may need to do some modifications to irrigation, and I'll talk about our irrigation plan in a moment, and there may be some small costs associated with that. When it comes to savings in the municipal side, irrigation is where it's at. That's where we make a big difference. Our top 10 accounts have significant irrigation obligations associated with them. This is a picture of Blossom Hill Park on a weekday. And one of the challenges I think that we're facing is how do we keep a park that's active and where the grass is a significant part and a significant draw for the park and is heavily used in play while still managing our conservation. So we've taken this to heart, and this is the picture on the screen is a weekday afternoon at Blossom Hill Park where there were actually more kids out playing on the lawn than there were on the playground itself. Our park staff has taken a look at our parks, park by park, and this is attributed to our parks lead, Ruben Galvin, who has done the heavy lifting on this one. He's put together a 3-stage plan. This park that's on the screen is Blossom Hill Park. And in this particular park, we're proposing that we start reducing water in a 3-tiered plan, reducing depending on what the usage is. So in this particular plan, park areas that are in red or the number 2 areas would receive the first reductions, and areas that are in the green color, number 3, would be held for continued use so that we have a balance of that quality of life with the conservation. Now, not all, as you can see from this park, not all parks have a 3-phase approach. This one has just a stage 2 and stage 3. But you could take a look at another park. This is Gatos Park, where we have an upper field, and the upper field at Gatos gets very little use, and is a great opportunity from staff's perspective to return that either to an unkept and letting the turf die, or to actually convert it to a natural landscaping or water efficient landscaping. And so that's, in our mind, a great opportunity to take on that 3-stage process and really proactively manage our turf as opposed to doing a across-the-board reduction. So with that, our next steps include so questions and discussion tonight, adoption of the urgency ordinances, we've outlined it for you, with a return to council with a formal ordinance within our 45-day timeline that's associated with adopting an urgency ordinance, and then a report on status, as the town manager mentioned, to start the report regularly, including weekly updates where it's needed, and council reports as we catch significant changes. Also like to catch a mistake that we made in the draft ordinance that we can rectify before we finalize it, in that we reference the water department in there, and obviously the town has no water department. That would be payment directly to the town versus to a water department. And with that, that concludes the staff report, and staff is here for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Morley. Questions? Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for the report. First of all, if we adopt the motion that is suggested, does that have a 45-day time frame? And where I'm going with this is the town manager referenced the fact that this is, something that can be modified. So if we take a action tonight, when could that action be modified if we wanted to?
It could be modified within that 45-day period under the urgency requirement, didn't require any public noticing that we usually do in the papers. that allows you by 4/5 vote to adopt this tonight, and then anytime during the 45-day period, it has to come back with you with that formal publishing notice and any other issues that you come up to bring up today. So with your time period of this council meeting and with the July when you're out, it would probably come in the second meeting in June. So it's a little over a month probably is when it'd come back, but it certainly could come back even sooner.
All right, thank you. And then the second question, is this ordinance, have the other West Valley cities, and I'll define that by Campbell, Saratoga, Cupertino, have the other West Valley cities enacted an ordinance akin to this one or any ordinance at all, and Campbell, akin to this one or any ordinance at all?
Cupertino, I believe, is hearing this tonight as well, so they have that on their docket. Campbell heard it last week, and I provided you that information. And trying to recall offhand if they adopted the ordinance or not. I'll have to look back on that. I don't think they did. I think they've continued it, and they're going to hear it. Again, that plays to the dynamic nature of the issue and it continuing to evolve. And Saratoga is also in a wait and see mode to see what other West Valley cities act on.
Thank you.
I'm just going to say I attended a West Valley mayor's meeting. When was it? Last week? I'm losing track. We discussed these issues. Campbell did actually bring it up at their previous meeting. They continued it. I think they're actually hearing it tonight. There was some discussion that the West Valley cities may going to the point on the PowerPoint about cooperation and a stronger voice among the cities. And I'm looking at Ms. Prevetti because she attended with me. But some discussion of perhaps issuing some kind of joint statement, whatever it might be, of all the West Valley cities with respect to this issue. There is an elected officials water summit this Saturday that I'm going to go to. I don't know if anyone else is going to go, Councilwoman Sayoc, where we'll discuss some of these issues, but I don't think any of those things would necessarily, and here I'm going to step out the line, but Mr. Schultz, necessarily prevent us from taking action this evening, correct?
Correct. No, it would not. I mean, I think it's evolving and there's other issues that come up, and it's really what your ordinance is how far you want to go with restrictions. Is really some cities or towns might only put one or two restrictions, and some of them might go much further than even ours goes, and that's where it's going to shake out what the different communities are doing that we can look at during the 45-day period.
Okay. Other questions? Councilwoman Sayoc.
Thank you. I have some questions on process of an ordinance. The way it's currently written, we have specific measures within the ordinance of what we will be doing. Is it possible, because of the dynamic nature of what's happening, is it possible to have an ordinance acknowledging the drought, yet not necessarily specifying the measures we'll take because those could change as conditions change? Or is it, from a legal perspective?
Well, if you're commanding a person to do or not do something, for example, the washing a car or not doing it, then it needs to be in that ordinance. So we need to have that. You can do different stages. So that's the newest one coming out, that you actually have a first stage, second stage, third stage, depending on where we head, so you don't have to bring it back. And that's something we're looking at, which would give staff the ability to declare those different stages depending on where we are in the
but you could distinguish that from actions involving the town in terms of our own
regulations. Yes, our own facilities don't necessarily have to be in an ordinance.
Okay, and so the reason why we're putting the specific measures in here is to give us the full legal backing we need if we wanted to ever enact. Okay, I understand it. And then a question to Mr. Morley, if I may. So Santa Clara Valley Water District is recommending a 30% reduction. Could you just talk to me a little bit about the pros and cons and why the recommendation at staff level is at 20% versus the 30%?
We left the recommendation at the state mandated level with the idea that we're achieving the 25% already, and we'll continue to actively manage our water and especially at our parks and ensure that we're as efficient as we can be. Certainly, if council wanted to push the bar to that next level and go with a 30%, that's something that we'd be happy to take on as a staff. That starts to eat into some of those difficult decisions about where you make those reductions, or where staff makes those reductions, and how it affects the quality of life in the town. So what council needs to be comfortable with the fact that we'll be allowing some turf to die. We may need to turn the fountain at the plaza off. Those kinds of hard decisions that are brought to the table with that kind of a discussion.
One follow-up, then Councilman Leonardis.
One follow-up. So I understand the measures that the town is doing, and it sounds like we've been doing great measures at the 25%. What can we do, though, to get to the private usage at that 9%? And how do we, that's the ordinance?
That's the ordinance.
Okay.
So the ordinance allows us to do that enforcement behind the measures. So in the ordinance in section 3 in part A, there's a whole list of items. Those are actually state mandated items. So those are already in place as well. This allows us to enforce it at the local level.
Okay, I see.
That is where you see those 8 measures in some jurisdictions going much further, all the way to, odd day irrigations or every other day, and we haven't done that yet, requiring private on when they can and cannot irrigate. And those are some things that some towns and cities are looking at, or we allow the use in this to wash a motor vehicle as long as the nozzle can be turned on or off, and some towns and cities are looking at, you just can't do it at all. You can't wash your car. So there's other steps that will come back in the next 45 days and say, this is what other jurisdictions are going, how far do you want to push it?
Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. So, Mr. Morley, regarding our own watering schedule, they say like 80% of California's water goes to watering lawns and landscaping. And I know we have in our parks vast amounts of natural grass. And I'm assuming the 25% reduction that we've achieved so far, we've kind of already implemented watering schedules. Is there any tweaking we could do on those schedules to further, how can I say it, try to achieve the 30%? And different times of day. I guess the big question is, what time of the day are we watering? And if we watered later in the day or late at night or something, would that assist in saving or reaching some more savings?
We do water currently in the middle of the night, so the watering is as prescribed at nighttime when it's most efficient to do so. Through last year, we were watering 3 times a week. We've actually reduced that to 2 times a week. With a few exceptions where we get heavy use, for instance, at the plaza, and when we have music in the park, we need to add some extra watering cycles, which is why we're proposing an overall 25% or 20% reduction versus a meter by meter type of a reduction, so that we can actively manage and be accountable for our overall usage versus a park by park or location by location measure.
Thank you.
Other questions? Councilman Rennie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Director Morley, so I have a few questions towards the extra items, your extra items list that the town could do. I guess maybe starting with your first stage, second stage. So first stage is basically let it die, correct? And then second stage, so like the area of Blossom Hill Park, you were going to let it get brown, but not so brown that you have to replace the turf afterwards. Is that correct?
That would be our intent, yes.
Okay. Then my second question is about the fountain. You have different things you talk about, how much to run the fountain or not. And you say we need to run it at least 3 hours a week, I believe, to keep the apparatus from deteriorating to the point that we'd have to replace it, I guess. And then you have a suggestion of cutting 6.5 hours a day to 4 hours a day. I'm wondering, I guess my question is, my first thought is, why not just run it on the weekends and not run it during the week? So my question would be, do you know what the usage is during the week?
We don't have an exact count. I can tell you from my observations that it gets a fair amount of use in the early and early afternoon into the evening hours, especially during the summer, which is also when we lose the most water to evaporation. The weekends, we run the fountain on Saturday now. We have it off for the farmer's market on Sunday. So there's an opportunity on our 3-hour-a-week rotation to run it Saturday morning is our 3 hours, but also the opportunity to run it sort of that late afternoon option to keep the fountain up and going for users 4 hours a day.
So, okay, so you're saying it is fairly well used during the week?
It is, yes.
I'll give back the...
Other questions? Thank you, Mr. Morley. I do have some speaker cards, actually, I think. Do I? What number is this? 8. Yes. Angelia Dorner.
Hello, I'm Angelia Dorner from a proud resident from the Almond Grove, and I know that all of these things sound great, and so I hope we can do the most that we can with conserving water. One of the things that is going on with the Almond Grove project is a replacement of trees. Originally, the residents were told that the only trees that were going to be taken out were liquid amber trees. There's a big one right out front. I grabbed a couple of the little hard things to show you what, if you ever see those are liquid ambers. But right now there's 30 trees on Bachman that are going to be removed. There are 30 trees on Broadway that are going to be removed. So we're losing those canopies, but what I'm up here for is because they are going to be replaced with trees that I understand are somewhat drought resistant and root non-invasive, which is all good and wonderful. But I'm really concerned that even if they're drought tolerant, all of the arborists and several people in the neighborhood have talked to different gardens, and they just have called me saying that the minimum of the first 2 years of a new tree really does need to have significant deep water, deep root watering on a regular basis. So I'm concerned about these 60-plus trees that are going to be going in, I guess, within the next 6 months or so, and how those are going to be handled to be sure that they get watered properly after construction. Residents may not have any irrigation out to those parking strips. If they do, more than likely they're going to be losing those irrigation capabilities, because once the sidewalks are ripped up and stuff, that stuff will probably get damaged. So the residents aren't sure what they're going to be able to do. Is that on their water meter? Is it on the town's water meter? I guess primarily I'm just concerned is knowing questions to the town. When are the trees going to go in? Is it going to be when they do the sidewalk work, or after construction? Are the new trees going to be protected adequately if it's done before construction? Who's going to be watering them if they're done before construction gets started? And who's going to be making sure that they do get watered properly the first, I'm told, minimum 2 years of their life? So it's just questions that I'm posing to be sure that we consider them and that we don't lose the investment of the new trees that we're putting in, and that they get properly watered and properly trained and pruned to turn into the kinds of trees that they're supposed to be. Maybe 10 years from now we'll get some canopies back and some colors and whatnot. So I just wanted to put those questions out to you as you start considering town measures over the next year or two, that you keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen Ma.
Good evening, Mayor and Town Council members. First, my name is Stephen Ma. I'm the Executive Director of LGS Recreation, and I want to thank Matt for reaching out to the Rec Department to really have a discussion about these conservation measures and how it might affect some of our programs. I have reviewed the staff report for this item and agree with staff's recommendation on taking a balanced approach to the conservation measures. The Rec Department currently uses Blossom Hill, Oak Meadow, as well as Creekside Parks for a variety of recreation courses. I think identifying strategies to maintain portions of the park in usable conditions for recreation use is highly preferable from my perspective. In my experience, when grass or turf is allowed to die for conservation measures, they're also prone to be torn up by recreation use, and this creates a safety issue in my mind when I think about programs that are run on turf that is basically dead. In maintaining some of Los Gatos' quality of life, even in these drought times, you're going to have to make some difficult decisions. And again, I believe a balanced approach towards these conservation measures are the ones that I think would certainly work best for the Rec Department. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morrow. Let's see if there's questions. Thank you. Rachel Gibson.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. My name is Rachel Gibson. I'm with the Santa Clara Valley Water District's Office of Government Relations, here to express full support for the 3 staff recommendations and also to thank Director Morley and city staff for working with us early on in crafting a lot of these measures. We'd like, however, to ask you to go one step further and, whether by ordinance or resolution, call upon your residents and businesses to save that extra amount of 30%. It's based, as Director Morley referenced earlier, on local groundwater conditions. Our groundwater basins are in even worse shape this year, not surprisingly, as a result of the drought than they were this time last year, and we only expect things to get worse. The State Water Resources Control Board took action today, mandating that additional 20% that's going to be imposed not just on Los Gatos, but a lot of the West Valley cities served by San Jose Water Company. And to Mayor Jensen's point about regional consistency, we're very much in support of that as well, and that's one of the big topics that we're going to be discussing during the Drought Summit on Saturday. So with that, I'll stand open to questions and again urge you to support the staff recommendation and hopefully call for 30% as well.
Thank you, Ms. Gibson. Questions? Councilman Rennie.
Ms. Gibson, so what happens if we actually do start getting subsidence? What's the implications of that?
Councilmember Rennie, to your question about subsidence, first of all, for those that don't know, subsidence is, of course, when the groundwater aquifer essentially becomes empty and the land surface subsides. It can snap infrastructure that is subsurface. It can also cause anything on the top of the surface to crack, roads, bridges, et cetera. We have a number of index wells all over Santa Clara County that measure the level of the land surface elevation. We had 3 index wells in August of last year hover right at the subsidence threshold. When they get close to that threshold, we call upon our retailers, and we work very closely with them. San Jose Water Company is one of them, to get voluntary cutbacks in groundwater pumping and use alternate sources. That's the best, fastest, and easiest way to address it right away.
So if we do have subsidence and it's the collapsing of the aquifer, can we somehow build the aquifer back for future use when we actually have enough water to fill it up?
We wish. No, subsidence is permanent. Once you lose that groundwater storage, you never get it back, and that's why we guard our groundwater basins very vigilantly.
Thank you, Ms. Gibson. I don't have any other cards on this matter, so I'm going to close the public hearing. I'm going to look to the council for questions, comments, or a motion. Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. I'm going to go ahead and try the motion, which is to go with the staff recommendation to adopt the urgency ordinance and direct staff to implement the water conservation measures as described in the report. And in particular, they were the ones that I saw on the 2 slides that Mr. Morley had up on the screen. What can Los Gatos do page, and what others are doing, the recommendations. And then Part C, approve the $65,000 to fund water conservation measures in the town. In addition, I would like to add a few bells and whistles for the residents. One would be if you walk into a restaurant, you have to request water. They don't just put water on your table. Another would be you have to do your watering before 5 a.m. Another would be you can't have any runoff onto your sidewalk if you're watering. And last but not least, the nozzle, the nozzle on the hose if you're washing your car, so you can turn off the hose. And that would be my motion.
Vice Mayor Spector.
I'll second the motion, but I have a question of staff. With regard to the maker of the motion's additors, specifically the nozzle, is this consistent with the proposed urgency ordinance?
It is, and is included in the urgency ordinance.
That makes it even easier. Okay, seconding the motion.
Well, Mr. Morley, while you're up there, I thought everything that Councilman Leonardis pointed out was actually in the ordinance, correct?
The only item that was not was the time of day for watering, and there's also a time of day that's put forward by San Jose Water, the Water District, and if anybody can help me with that. I believe it's before 10 a.m. And after 5 p.m. As the hours of, and from a regional consistency, those might be better hours to stick with.
Councilman Leonardis.
Question. So, without being an expert on this topic, because I remember when I worked on the Santa Clara Valley Water District, they were saying before 5 a.m. watering was more optimal. We're saying before 10 a.m. or after 5 p.m. is more general and probably more attainable for some people, especially if they don't have automatic sprinklers, I guess. But is before 5 a.m. more optimal as far as conservation is concerned?
I would say it would be, and that would be raising the bar a little bit.
Okay. Well, I'm comfortable raising the bar.
Seconder?
As am I.
Councilman Rennie?
So I guess I have a couple questions. I'll start with the one we just talked about. Is that automatic watering has to be done before 5, or if people do hand watering, do they have to get up before 5 to do their watering?
I was in reference to automatic sprinkler systems that are timed so they could be set to water before 5 a.m.
Is that the understanding of the seconder?
It is.
Okay. Councilman Rennie?
So I'm in agreement with the motion so far. I'm interested, though, to look at some of the other items that were on the optional list. Would we want to try to include those in the motion, or do this motion and then look for a motion on optional items to add, which might be easier to do it as two motions?
Let's stick with what we have right now, and then if we want to do a separate motion to add other things, let's try to think about considering it, would be my suggestion. So we have a motion on the floor that's been described, it's been seconded. Before I intend to support the motion, but I want to make sure of staff that that my nitpick typos in the proposed draft were caught. Thank you, Mr. Schultz. And that we will have an opportunity to adjust anything that comes back within the 45 days, even if we take action on the proposed draft tonight, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So with that, I will support the motion. Councilwoman Sayoc.
Couple of questions of the maker of the motion as well as the seconder. So as it currently is written, our emergency ordinance calls for the 20% per California State Water Resources Control Board, with no mention of the 30% recommended by Santa Clara Valley Water District. Would you at least be amenable to a mandatory 20% with recommended of a 30%?
I'm glad that you asked the question, because I was thinking maybe the thing to do would say 25%, splits between the 20 and the 30. As Director Morley indicated, we're already operating at a 25% at the town level. So I think if we request the same of our residents, we can lead by example. And we're not, I mean, I understand the urgency of 30, but if we can get 25 for now, I think that would be something I could agree to.
Councilman Leonardis, then do you want to amend your motion to put a 25% requirement in?
Yes.
Okay, seconder?
That's acceptable.
Okay. Councilwoman Sayoc?
And then one other question that I had for staff that may lead to a change. The water fountains, I know that it needs to run for 3 hours. Is there a reason why you're recommending 4 hours versus the minimum of 3? The fountains that we use in our town plaza?
Yeah, so we have two recommendations. The recommendation in the base staff recommend. Let me back up. The base staff recommendation is that we turn the fountain off and run it 3 hours a week for our minimum number. The option that we provided is an option in case the council was uncomfortable with turning the fountain off, to run the fountain for 4 hours a day, not as a means of keeping the fountain in good shape, but rather as a means to providing that amenity to the public.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. And then to the maker of the motion, in your motion, is it the 3 hours minimum or is it the 4 hour, since there were two options?
My motion is the 3 hours per week.
Okay.
Seconder?
That's acceptable to me.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
That's it.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on the motion? Is everybody clear on what the motion is now, I hope? Okay. I'm going to call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Morley. Thank you, Ms. Gibbons, for being here.
Can we
Gibson.
consider
Gibson.
additional items?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes. We talked about the optional items. Go ahead.
So staff has provided A through E of additional items. I'm not really comfortable with A, but because it allows a lot of turf to die and then have to replace it. Although the part of it where they talk about reducing some of the turf area at Bachman seems to make sense to me, replacing more of that with drought tolerant. I would say that if we did that, we should consider Bachman's pretty heavily dog usage, so the drought tolerant would need to be something that was aware of, people running their dogs through it. I mean, tan bark's not really exciting, but that's actually not a bad thing for dogs to be running through, for example. But if you, there is grasses that are drought tolerant that just get beat up and look terrible, which I wouldn't think be as appropriate for dog use. Do you have any response to that?
Yeah, I think we agree that we'd want to maintain the space, especially at Bachman where it has the dog use, but in other locations as well for what the alternative uses would be. So it would be something we'd go in with eyes open. I think specific to Bachman, we do have a capital project for that park, and we could certainly incorporate the discussion in with the neighborhood when we meet with them on what would be ideal for that particular location.
And sort of a follow-up, other parks, are there other opportunities to pull in some of the non-turfed areas? A lot of times you have tan bark or something on the edges of the turf, and you started pulling them in over the years. This might be a good opportunity to squeeze out some of that. I know, like this picture we saw of Blossom Hill Park, I noticed the grass looks like it goes all the way out to the edge. You might be able to create more. You had a closer-up picture of kids sitting on the lawn there. And it looks like the grass goes all the way out to the trees. You could add some tan barked along the side and not really affect the quality of life usage on this, for example. I would think more ideas like that might work.
So going back to this diagram, what it shows is a balance of our irrigation zones along with where the turf is. So with a zone that's set up to come on all at once, if we were to change from that and to narrow an area, we'd have to redo the irrigation for it. So it's a balance of the immediate costs with achieving the savings. Where it makes sense and we can fit it in the $65,000 allotment, we would actually make some of those changes.
Thanks. Question for the mayor, I think. Do you want me to suggest these one at a time, or how do we want to do this?
Well, with your permission. Mr. White, you started us off by indicating that you wanted council feedback on different areas and that this was a moving target that you'd give us information on. I'm going to suggest that what Councilman Rennie is giving you is direction on additional information, in particular to management of the parks, if I understand you correctly, so that the next time that we hear this, we could get that information back.
Yes.
Would that work? Okay. Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just for clarification on process, since what the council member was just saying was not a motion, am I understanding from the mayor that if council members individually want information from staff the next time this comes back, this would be the appropriate time to raise those issues?
You're understanding that correctly.
Thank you.
Have at it.
And Mayor, when you're through getting input from the council, I have one request of the council too in terms of direction back to staff.
Would it be helpful for you to have that now before you get other
Certainly.
questions?
As you know from the ordinance applies largely to customers of San Jose Water. While there's no legally binding reason that they have to provide resources to us to help enforce that ordinance, we believe that we should at least make a formal request to them for funds to assist in code enforcement activities that pertain to achieving a better than a 9% savings with respect to the private sector use of water.
Vice Mayor Spector.
A couple of questions. First of all, to the manager, is there some reason that you're suggesting this request be made to San Jose Water Company and but not to Santa Clara County Water District?
Well, I'm suggesting San Jose Water because they are the retailer for water to the Los Gatos customers, and they purchase their water from Santa Clara Water District.
All right, thank you. Then for me, whether the mayor wants it by way of a motion or just by a request, I would definitely request that the town ask San Jose Water District to contribute funds to our enforcement effort.
Okay.
San Jose Water Company.
Company, correct.
Since that's more of a, not an informational item, but a direction, why don't you convert that to a motion?
All right, I would ask staff to ask the San Jose Water Company to contribute funds to the town's enforcement of our emergency ordinance.
Okay, is there a second for that motion? Seconded by Councilwoman Sayoc. Any discussion on that motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Vice Mayor Spector, any informational requests for the staff to bring back?
I do not.
Anyone else? Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. So I was going to bring up this point before, but essentially, how are we going to enforce the ordinance? Are we going to request of our code enforcement personnel to go out and quote unquote police be the water police?
Currently, there's a multi-phased enforcement approach where San Jose Water provides sort of the first 3 steps of education and outreach and notification of violations. That's, as I understand it from my conversations with San Jose Water, that's largely been successful. There hasn't been a need for the 4th phase, which would be the citation phase. But as you can see from that, all of that work is on San Jose Water to do. I believe it's largely completed through response to complaints.
Thank you. I did see that information in the report, and I'm glad that you brought that forth because I was concerned that you catch somebody the first time, then you go back the second time, and the third time, and by the 4th time, it's like a lot of water has been wasted. So I'm glad to know that is a successful approach according to what they've told us. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilwoman Sayoc.
Okay, thank you. And I'm also going to go through what's listed in the staff report. Under A, very much support the managed municipal water usage to achieve an increased ongoing 30% reduction. I like the approach of tiering the parks. One thing I would recommend you do is perhaps utilize the Parks Commission for some community outreach. I know parks and landscaping is important to many of our community, but also an increased awareness of how irrigation plays into drought conservation would be helpful. And perhaps, I know Oak Meadow as well as Bachman is going through a master plan. Perhaps this is something, correct?
Correct.
And just overall, I think water conservation measures should be something that they would be looking into moving forward.
Thank you.
And then with regard to item E, water efficient landscaping, very much support that, and I'd like to see that. And I think that helps address some of the issues that Ms. Dorner had raised about landscaping and trees, and what do we do with new landscaping, new trees, and what do we do with new building construction. I know Santa Clara Valley Water District is looking at some water use ordinances for new development, and I think there's opportunities for us in the town as well as throughout the district to look at how to incorporate better water use ordinances as we look at increasing population growth.
Thank you, Councilwoman Sayoc. I'm going to just first indicate that the policy committee is actually looking at landscaping policies in the town. But I think that with respect to your last statement about paragraph E on page 8 of our staff report. That does require a lot of staff time to come back and think about reviewing or proposing a new ordinance. So I think that should also be in the form of a motion. You want to convert that to a motion?
Okay, so I move that staff look at reviewing and updating current town code for water efficient landscaping as currently written in page 8 of our staff report. And that's all.
And yeah, you just want to use the language in E, basically?
Correct.
Okay, on page 8. Is there a second to that motion? Councilman
Second.
Rennie? Or Councilman Leonardis, one of the two? You both had your hands up.
I'll second that.
Okay. Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A question of staff. The motion is a good motion, and I can support it. However, it seems to me, and this is the question for the manager, there is a lot that's being asked of staff, and that rather than mandate it, we bring it back when we establish our priorities. And so my question of the manager is, which way would he suggest we move on this issue?
Well, what I would suggest is that you've made motions, you've indicated clearly you want us to look at these. I would like to be able to put them into a work plan and have an opportunity for both Parks and Public Works and the community development staff to look at what it's going to take and what kind of time frame we're going to need to implement some of these. As the motions were being made, I even whispered to the CDD director she'll want part of the $65,000 possibly to do some of the analytical work there. So that's why we wanted some funds in there. We can probably get some temporary help to look at this, as well as maybe pick up from other jurisdictions some completed work. So I would say we need to package this for you and bring it back. There are certain things that you've acted on that we can do immediately. You know, the fountains are off now. They can stay off except for the 3 hours. So whatever we can do right away, we'll specify in the work plan that those have been implemented. So that's how I would suggest we deal with that, through a work plan, telling you what we've acted on and what we need to act on and what it'll take to do that.
All right, Madam Mayor, with that explanation, I'm going to be supporting the motion because it seems as though staff will be able to make it into workable objectives.
Thank you. And we do have a motion on the floor. And Mr. White, in the preamble, you did tell us that you were going to go through a work plan. So I'm assuming that when we're going through these motions that we are indeed going to see them again through a work plan in our strategic goals. But I wanted to make sure that it was very specific what the council direction was with regard to these. So that's why you're getting the motions.
Yes, and the specificity helps us lay out the projects within the work plan and to bring that back to you in a reasonable and definable fashion.
So we do have a motion on the floor with respect to paragraph E option, which is reviewing water efficient landscaping ordinances for the town, page 8. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on that motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, it passes unanimously. Anything else on this? Councilman Rennie.
I have a couple more. Let me start with, so the ordinance we just passed made it illegal to water median turf strips, which reminds me of some work we did on the Parks Commission even before Director Morley came along, where we were trying to convert the turf at the median strip at Los Gatos Hamilton Boulevard and Los Gatos Boulevard. And we never managed to execute on that. Along with that project, we were looking at converting the turf in the Hillbrook lighting and whatever district we call it. There's turf in there. We were looking at trying to make that into drought tolerant. Now seems like a good time to maybe go execute on that. And is anything happening on those now? And can we get going on those projects?
Because Hillbrook is in a landscape and lighting district, we've reduced the water there. We hadn't planned on not watering that particular area or converting it. we can certainly take a look at that and develop a plan for moving that one forward. To the location on at Los Gatos Almaden Road on along the boulevard, we've actually turned that turf off completely, so that will no longer receive water and will die in short order. Our intent had been to do wood chips across that area, but we can look at a project to re-landscape it.
Sort of following up on that, we had, in the plan, we had been trying to get rebates from the water district for turf conversions. Would those still be available, even though it's still even illegal to water that now?
That's a good question. We'll reach out to the water district on that one.
Next subject, if I may.
I know that Vice Mayor Spector had her hand up. Okay. Councilman Rennie.
So my next one is about the fountain. I do think it's a good idea to keep the fountain on some amount, but try to limit our water evaporation exposure. Is it possible, and it's probably going to be a little bit cumbersome, but is it possible to turn it off on days when it goes over 90 degrees? I know that's when people are going to want it most, but that's, something, 90 may be a magical number, but, we have a few points in the summer, 1 week here, 1 week there, maybe 2 total where it gets really hot. It would make sense to not have it on at all for that, for example.
So, sir, I think the scheduling on the fountain allows us actually to set the wet bulb setting, which will account for the temperature.
Okay.
I'll pass for now.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just clarification with regard to Bachman. I thought, Mr. Morley, I heard you refer to getting input from the neighbors there, but then there may have been a motion that said that they were going to get input from the Parks Commission. Just explain to me what the process is going to be with regard to that specific park.
I think that will be part of the work plan that we bring back to you, is what does the actual process look like. There's a bunch of moving parts at this point that we'll need to weave together to make it most comprehensive. Our intent on Bachman had been to do the outreach in the fall, which is the time when you want to do a re-landscaping, so there may be some sort of staged stop watering now and re-landscape in the fall or something along that line, but we need to regroup a little bit and get some direction for you.
Anything else on this matter? Councilman Rennie.
I have one last one. One of the item D talked about artificial turf in some of the parks, and I'm curious how warm my other council members are to that idea. I was wondering if we could do some kind of pilot program. In other words, don't convert all of a park, but convert a section of it and then get feedback on what people thought. And I'm thinking it would need to be a piece of the park that it sort of has a natural boundary to it. You might consider something like Plaza Park, the piece at the end down near the fountain or something, changing it to artificial turf, and then see if it gets used, see if people don't like it. It's, I know at one point people hated artificial turf, but now you start seeing it pop up all over people's front yards. I see new houses are putting it in to start. So there may be more acceptance to it, and maybe it might be something worth trying in a public park and see if we do start to get acceptance of that.
As you know, we have it at the sports park, and it's a great service for us there. There are ongoing concerns from some members of the public about a potential health issue with artificial turf. There's nothing that's been substantiated that in the studies that we can determine, but an ongoing concern as well, at any rate, that brings forward some objections to artificial turf. But certainly, if it was the council's will, we could pilot it at an additional location.
Mr. Morley and Councilman Rennie, I'm going to suggest that perhaps that falls under the category of management of our parks that we've sort of asked you to come back with in the work plan. And so could that be that determination, or whatever you are going to do, be incorporated into however you present to us on parkland management with respect to irrigation?
We'll bring that back.
Okay. Would that be okay? Okay, anything else on this? Thank you very much. Thank you all. Okay, I'm going to look to the council. It's 8:45. We have 3 more items. We have a lot of people that have been waiting patiently, probably for our next item. Do we want to take a break now or try to get through the next item and then take a break after? I'm seeing break now. So we're going to take a break for 10 minutes and or thereabouts and come back and begin with item 10. We've already taken care of item 9. If you haven't been here from the start of the meeting, that one's gone. So we'll start with item 10. White is not with us, but I think for our next item, Ms. Pravetti can probably handle it just fine. So we are going to go back into session. Mr. Morley and Mr. Schultz. Thank you, gentlemen. Item number 10, which is our 2015-2023 proposed housing element, general plan amendment, application GP 14002, and addendum to the general plan and final EIR. And Ms. Pravetti, I'm assuming that you are our presenter on this matter.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. This evening, the item before you is our 2015 through 2023 housing element. This is a required element of our general plan, and the community here in Los Gatos has worked very hard to come to you this evening with a recommendation for how we're going to plan for housing for all income segments here in our community. We've also worked very closely with the State Department of Housing and Community Development, and as demonstrated in the addendum that was sent to you on Friday, May 1st, the state has indicated that if the council adopts the public hearing draft along with the proposed revisions that were included in your staff report, that together this housing element does comply with state law and it would be certified by the state. It's a very important milestone for us because then the town is eligible for grant monies, and we are also able to continue to move forward with our other planning programs. So very quickly, the housing element is a plan for the future of where we would like to build housing in the town. We've been given a target of approximately 620 units as identified in the staff report. We need to provide housing for a variety of income categories as identified. And working with our council-appointed Housing Element Advisory Board, the committee identified a set of sites as identified in Table 4 to the staff report, and we're going to put this up on the screen for your reference. You'll see the top line is what our targets are. These are coming from the regional housing need allocation process that the regional government gives to us. So we had targets for very low, low and moderate income and above moderate income households. And as you know, with our household incomes being so high here in Santa Clara County, that we're really talking about housing for working families. The Housing Element Advisory Board, after much discussion, identified a strategy that essentially takes advantage of the approved units that the council approved in 2014, identified the Oak Rim AHAS site as one of the housing element sites, identified the current second unit program as something that is continuing to demonstrate production of affordable housing, proposes an enhanced second unit program that would require future code changes but would allow for more second units to happen in the community, identified the North 40 specific plan as another opportunity, and then we have some vacant housing element sites from last time known as the Oka Road. So together we're able to meet the housing need with this combination of sites. And staff strongly recommends that the council consider this as the basis for the housing element as we move forward. The housing element is also required to consider policies and actions to reduce the barriers to affordable housing. And so in the housing element, you'll see a whole set of actions that will become, if adopted, part of the work plan for the Community Development Department, and we will be required to follow through and bring those forward. They include code changes, they include other action items. In addition, the Housing Element Advisory Board, I should mention, chaired by Councilmember Sayoc and Vice Chair by Mayor Jensen, also identified other items that Council may want to consider during your goal-setting session. These are identified on the bottom of page 5, really trying to think of what more the town could do. In the same spirit, the Planning Commission, when holding its public hearing, also identified items, and they're included in your report on the bottom of page 6. And staff also recommends that both sets of recommendations move forward to the goal setting. I think we've got a great community of planning commissioners, general plan committee, and general public that's been thinking long and hard about these issues and really thinking about how we can advance programs to really meet the needs here in the community. And with that, I'll close my presentation. Joel and I, and of course our town attorney, are all here to answer additional questions if you have any. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Pavetti. Questions? Councilman Rennie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I haven't really had the opportunity to work on the housing element, so I just want to ask some sort of basic questions, not yet getting towards any kind of decision. As I was reading in the Planning Commission addendum report, there is something that talks about what happens if cities don't have a complying housing element. And I had two questions on that. The first one says, you have limited access to state funding for such community needs as economic development and transportation. Are we getting funds now for that? Would we lose something?
We won't lose anything. However, the transportation monies now that are flowing from the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, one of the requirements is a certified housing element. So we would lose out on our fair share of just the basic slice of pavement maintenance money that is coming to our town. And I expect that as the Association of Bay Area Governments looks at additional funding criteria as they update the sustainability plan, those types of requirements are going to become even stronger.
One more question from this area. So also it talks about things that there were some cities that were successfully sued, Menlo Park, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, several of them in here. And one of the items it says suspension of local control of building, such as suspension of community's authority to issue building permits or grant zoning changes. Does that mean nothing would happen, or the state would be giving these out instead?
That essentially means there's no building permits being issued until the housing element is complete and certified. So essentially it becomes a moratorium on your town.
And one last question sort of related to this. So we're supposed to get this done by May 30th, correct?
May 31st.
May 31st. So if we don't get it done until June, nothing really will happen, correct?
Actually, it's a pretty serious consequence. We've already missed the first deadline in state law, which was the January 31st deadline. We now have until May 31st to complete and adopt our housing element. If we miss that date, we will be doing housing element updates for the next every 4 years. So instead of being on an 8-year cycle, we'll be doing this on a 4-year cycle, again, taking your staff away from doing perhaps other planning initiatives.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Pavetti? I actually have some. On the action items that are suggested on page 8, I was just curious, should the council adopt the housing element, which we have before us, that the state agency has said it will certify as we have it before us? I'm assuming that if and when it came to the point where we wanted to adopt alternative sites, that could be done as one of the action items and taken up later, even after we have a certified housing element, correct?
Yes, the adequate sites is really something that is within your control. If you wish, you can talk about that this evening or at the time that it's most appropriate, tied to other land use action, you can consider replacement sites at that time.
Okay, but as our CDD director and having worked through this, and believe me, I've worked on it too, we have a letter indicating that it's certifiable as is, and that if and when we came to the point where we had to make any adjustments, we have the opportunity to do that at the appropriate time, correct?
Yes.
Okay. In addition, if we wanted to make any changes to our AHOZ by ordinance or however else we wanted to change it, or convert our AHOZ design guidelines to a multifamily residential design guideline, we could also do that independent of any action we took on this proposed document, correct?
Yes.
Other questions? Vice Mayor Spector?
Thank you. And so the proposed document has the North 40 of 364 units. So if we were to approve that tonight, but then the specific plan doesn't have that many units, then how do we unravel that?
We have an action item in the draft housing element where within 1 year of the specific plan adoption with the revised housing units, the town would have to identify a replacement site and zone it for whatever that delta number of units would be.
And is it staff's recommendation that that would be a preferable process to the one that you had listed on page 7 of the staff report, where you had the issue of the sites selected at this time?
Yes, staff recommends that we stay with the Housing Element Advisory Board and Planning Commission recommendation to stay with the combination of sites that are already identified.
But why is that preferable, given the potential direction of the specific plan?
Because the specific plan as a whole has not yet been adopted. We've made tremendous progress, but in my experience, a specific plan isn't done until it's truly adopted as one piece of work.
All right, thank you.
And I just want to follow up on that before I call on Councilman Leonardis. Is another reason to take action tonight is to get the housing element certified?
Yes, please,
Okay.
thank you.
Just want to make sure. Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. So my question goes back to what Ms. Pravetti said about the one-year window. Given that the specific plan has not been adopted, and suppose it is adopted within the next year, is that going to cause us problems later? I don't know if you answer that or not. Am I asking the question?
I just want to make sure I understand it. I think we're on the track to have an action on the specific plan. So we're making good progress there as it relates to the action item in the housing element. And should the final number of housing units in the specific plan be reduced, say, to the 270, then there would be a companion action that we would bring forward for your consideration for a replacement site at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Councilman Rennie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'd like to ask on this chart here again, just my basic questions of, here you have 46 units for the Oak Rim Blossom Hill AHOZ. That site currently has housing. So is that 46 above the number that's there now, or is that a replacement 46? I'm just trying to understand how this works. I think Joel's ready to
Joel,
help.
thank you.
Yeah, that would be in addition to the existing units that are out there.
So if there was 100 there now, they'd build 146 or something like that?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Councilman Leonardis.
So looking at the table and looking at the Oak Rim Blossom Hill AHOZ site, I know this is the recommendation of the committee, but let's just say the council decided to choose one of these alternatives that's on page 7, and they decided that the South Bay site with 148 units would be traded for the Oak Rim site. That would help us more, right? That would provide more units. That wouldn't be a problem, even though this is the one that's we already got the letter back and everything else. We wouldn't be held up any additional time. Okay.
No, we would not be held up.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you. Following up on what Mr. Leonardis was saying, we go to, I think it's page 5 of the staff report. Anyway, one of the pages of the staff report, and I'm getting there now, which is page 7. There was a discussion of what the council could do if it reduced the number of units attributable to the North 40. And one of the suggestions was we can choose from this menu of potential options there. One of them was the South Bay site that Mr. Leonardis referenced. So if that were done tonight, would that slow down your process with the state?
We would need to make some text modifications to make the necessary substitutions in the document. It does not change the programs. It does not change the action items. It does not change the goals. We already have environmental clearance because it is an AHOZ site. So we would just have to make those text changes and then resubmit to the state, and we should be able to still make the deadline.
Thank you.
So, Ms. Pravetti, I just want to understand that having seen how this process works and having seen what the give and take is with the state bureaucracy, I have some concern that if the council were to change one of the sites, given that we have a letter indicating that this document is okay with them, that we would start all over again. Am I being overly pessimistic?
I don't think we would start all over again. I think, again, we would limit really to those 4 sites on page 7 of your staff report. We wouldn't want to be looking beyond the AHAs, because then there is absolutely no way we would be able to finish the document, do environmental clearance, et cetera. It's staff's recommendation, strong recommendation, to hold with what you have right now. But if we had to, if it was the council's preference to do a substitution, we would do it and work with the state and argue very strenuously that that they've been very clear that local control of identifying adequate sites is the business of the town, and certainly the town council. All the programs stay the same. We're just switching the site and the yield that it would provide.
Other questions? Councilwoman Sayak.
Thank you. With regard to the South Bay side, because it's not currently zoned residential, if a change were to happen today, would we then have to put some accompanying action to rezone that?
Absolutely.
And would that rezoning have to happen by the end of the month?
No, the rezoning does not.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Councilman Rennie.
Question about the South Bay site. So that site is the one that's kind of right at the edge of Los Gatos, off of Winchester, is that correct? And what school district is that in?
Look to my colleague.
It's in the Campbell School District. Let me see if I can find a graphic. It is just to the north of the existing Netflix Aventino apartments.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I have 2 cards. Leanne Marcelin.
Good evening, Mayor Jensen, Town Council members. Thank you so much for the opportunity to provide comments on the 2015 through 2023 housing element, and share the views of the Los Gatos Union High School. The Los Gatos Union School District as to the impact on our already overcrowded schools. Since a significant portion of the residential growth anticipated in the housing element is located within the Los Gatos Union School District's boundaries, the district believes that all school districts within the town of Los Gatos should share the responsibility of providing educational services to the students residing within the town of Los Gatos. It is our sincere hope that the Town Council will keep the district's concerns in mind as you consider the impact of the housing element on our schools. Thank you.
Questions for Ms. Marcelin? Thank you. Jeff Lockridge.
Hi, my name is Jeff Lockridge, 109 Paseo Lora. I would also like to offer up the possible alternative to using any AHAs in town. If the North 40 specific plan allows 270 units instead of the previous 364, additional sites need to be identified to meet our RENA requirement. The Housing Element Advisory Board recommendation included 364 units on the North 40, which included the 60 senior affordable housing units. The recommendation also included the 46 units from the Oak Rim apartment site on Blossom Hill Road. An option to look at might be to use all the housing units from the North 40 as well as the South Bay site using its current zoning. South Bay is already zoned high-density residential. Its location at the far north end of town is possibly problematic if the goal is to spread affordable housing across town. But traffic and school impacts should be less than putting a high-density development at, say, the Los Gatos Lodge. This option would result in 270 units from the North 40 and 148 from the South Bay site, totaling 418. The previous North 40's 364 plus the Oak Rim Apartments 46 totaled 410. Also, without the affordable housing overlay zone, town control is preserved to some extent as opposed to specifying any AHAS sites. AHAS sites, with their recent constraints removal by the states, are truly a very sharp double-edged sword. While they allow us to reach our RENA requirement faster, they will more than likely be developed quicker and with less control than those with those constraints removed. So using the existing zoning on the South Bay site would be an alternative to look at. This would also eliminate the necessity of any AHAS sites. So in addition, I'd like to request that unless a particular site is used in the actual housing element, that we remove any AHAS designation from it. I would also like to reinforce my position that something more than the General Plan Committee be put in place to keep the important elements of the housing element in front, in center, as future developments are considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lockridge. I don't have any other cards. I'm going to close the public portion of the hearing, and I'm going to look to the council for any additional questions they may have, comments, or a motion. Councilman Rennie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Lockridge reminded me of a question I had. So we've got these sites that are designated AHAS now, but none of them on the current list are part of our housing element. Does that mean somebody could come in and build on them as if they were AHAS sites with the by right designation, I guess?
The sites that are not part of the housing element and still have the AHAS would be eligible to be built. However, they would have to still comply with all of the affordability requirements that are within the code. We're only recommending that we change the affordability requirements for the AHAS site that is included in our housing element, and that would reduce the barrier for affordable housing and the barrier for development. So if someone can still build essentially up to 80%, 70 or 80% affordable on the other AHAS sites, or the town changes its code for the other AHAS sites, they have to meet all those requirements.
So what about the by right part of it? Is the EIRs are not needed, neg decks are not needed for those sites, is that correct?
Well, if it's not part of your housing element, then you don't have the by right concern. You would have some of you would have to meet the design standards, et cetera, but you wouldn't have the by right requirements as strongly imposed on the AHAS sites that are not part of your housing element.
So I'm drawing the conclusion that it's not really necessary to remove the AHAS designations then.
Well, the community had quite a discussion about that, the Housing Element Advisory Board, and you'll see in the discussion from the Planning Commission that is something that would likely, if you wish, could come back for further council conversation and clarification in the future. There is concern that if it's not a housing element site, is it really a site that the council wants to retain as a place for housing production? And that's a separate policy question that should probably be taken up at another time, just because it has a lot of other implications.
Thank you.
Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. So, Ms. Bravetti, Speaker Lockridge alluded to removing the AHAS designation. If we did that, say for the South Bay site, and say council moved in the direction of adopting that site as one of the alternatives in the table, would that hold up the process of working with the state further, or would we still be able to potentially meet the 30-day deadline?
Yeah, it would take more staff work to, prepare the necessary documents and submit them to the state. We'd have to walk the state through exactly what those changes were and why essentially all the programs still are applicable, so they should not be changing their determination, but just judging by their workload, because I imagine they've got housing elements pouring in throughout the Bay region. There are other cities and communities, even in this subregion, that are facing the same deadline. So I would hope that they would be able to give us a quick turnaround so that way we could, get this done. I feel more confident now that I have a letter from them that we are good to go, and I strongly recommend that we hold with what we have, and we'll have the opportunity later. We could certainly amend it later, yes, but it's best to get the certification first and then go later. And I think I think because you are now considering what those replacement sites are, that as the North 40 discussion continues, we will be that much further in terms of where the council might want to go in terms of choosing that replacement site if and when we need to do so. So I think this dialogue is very important, but we don't have to necessarily make that decision tonight.
Okay, before I call on the Vice Mayor, I'm going to make my own comment, and I'm actually going to try a motion. Having been on the General Plan Committee ages ago, and working and actually developing the AHOZs, and actually going through the housing element once before and going through it this time, I am painfully aware of how difficult it is to work with HCD. And that is the reason that I think it's very important for us to get a certified housing element. It is not insignificant not to have a certified housing element. We've looked at HEAB lawsuits successfully brought against cities that did not have one, that yes, indeed, shut down their ability to issue any kind of permit. So if you want to put a second story on, you can't do it, you can't do anything. And it also makes us ineligible for grants, and it makes us go through this very painful process every 4 years instead of every 8 years. And the targets, as Ms. Pravetti is well aware of, the RENA numbers, the criteria used to determine those change. So at one time, it was jobs, housing balance, and we were theoretically adversely affected by adding jobs. That could change. The criteria changes when ABAG meets. So to my mind, it's very important to get a document certified. We actually have a letter, unbelievably, from HCD saying that this document is certifiable as we have it. Certifiable, pun intended. So to me, it's quite important that we do that. I would be comfortable doing that even though the numbers in this document could change, because we do have time to allow us to examine that. And it's very important. We had discussions at HEAB about whether the AHOZ continued to be appropriate, whether that ought to be examined, whether there ought to be reevaluations, whether those design guidelines should change to multifamily. Those kinds of things aren't something that we should be doing in a month time frame. There's something that we should be doing outreach for. There's some things we should be thinking about. So given that, I mean, the motion I'm going to try, and maybe it's going to fail, we'll see, would be to adopt the resolution that we've been presented, adopting the 2015-2023 housing element, General Plan Amendment Application G14002, an addendum to the General Plan Final EIR, and refer the recommendations from the Housing Element Advisory Board and the Planning Commission, which I would point out include re-examining the AHOZ, re-examining the guidelines, looking at different kinds of replacement sites, possible rezoning. All of those things can be folded into our strategic goals session and be discussed and properly thought about from the luxury of having a certified housing element. So that's why my motion is as it is. So there you have it. Is there any second on that motion? It's going to fail for lack of a second. Councilwoman Sayak.
Actually, I will second the motion as well. Having worked on this intensely for the past year, I'd say, and understanding the back and forth that we have had with HCD. When we went into this in November, we had some verbal agreements that this would pass, and it came back with more changes necessary that I felt was a detriment to our town. And I worry that if we do not move forward with what they have already written to us as approval, things may change in a month that would further cause, I think, more problems that we will have to face later. So I would very much like to have this certified and then give us more time to think about potential options if we decide to change what is in Table 4.
We have a motion, second. Comments, questions on the motion? Councilman Rennie.
I'd like to make a couple comments, I guess. The first one is I agree that we shouldn't do it tonight, but I would like to take the AHOZ zone off the lodge. I think I can probably make these comments now. I prefer to be able to take the lodge development wherever it goes with a bit slower than an AHOZ zone would allow us, even though it's not by right. It still is a little bit fast-tracked, it sounds like to me. I perceive the lodge as an opportunity to address one of the big problems in our town, which is the high school traffic, and it happens to be at the back door of the high school. So I see potential mitigation measures that might help the school traffic, however you might want to go. So I don't want to fast-track the lodge site. So that's one comment, which we don't need to do anything with now, but I'd like to make it anyway. So my second comment is I would have preferred for us to just make the decision instead of having to come back on the sites. I assume we're not going to go backwards on the North 40. I don't want to see us go backwards. I want to see us make decisions and keep moving forward. So I would prefer a motion where we did something like took the North 40 on this table down to 270, removed the Oak Rim Blossom Hill, and added the South Bay site. We would have needed 138, and it gives you 148. So, and Mrs. Prevetti, when she was first asked, said she was pretty confident, I don't know, 99, 90%, 95%, that would not be a detriment to getting our housing element certified. I'd prefer to go that way just because I know we're setting ourselves up for more work. We as council keep coming back on things. I want to see us finish up. So my comments on that.
Other comments and questions? Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. So, Ms. Prevetti, I mean, there's a motion on the table, and I understand the the reason for it, and I understand we have a deal, and it's easy. We can take it, and it's kind of like done. We don't have to mess around with it. With that said, with what Mr. Rennie said, that was also my preferred option, would have been to change that one line of the table from the Oak Rim to the South Bay site. But it sounds like if we take the deal that's on the table, the motion that's on the table, we can go back and do that later. So I see no detriment. I say we take the deal because for me, I think it's important to meet the deadline and not have to go back and be those people shoving in at the end with all the other late. If it weren't for the last minute, nothing would get done, people. So.
Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to support the motion. The problem I'm having is that I would be voting for something that I don't believe, and that makes it very difficult. The housing element that's before us has, I don't have it before me, but it's 364 units on the North 40. And that is not a number I supported when we were discussing the North 40, nor is it a number that I support now. When I heard staff talk about what happens if we send the housing element forward by switching a couple of numbers, do we think it would be approved? And the answer I heard was yes. I think that the South Bay site, given that it's a different school district, I think that's another reason to use it instead of the North 40. So I actually agree with Mr. Rennie. I would take off the Oak Rim Blossom Hill site. I would add the South Bay, and I would leave the North 40 at whatever it is, 270. So for that reason, because it would be a dishonest vote on my part, I will not be able to support the motion.
Okay, so we'll see what happens. There's a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
No.
Okay, it fails 3-2. We'll look for an alternate motion. I should say the call. But Mayor Jensen and Councilwoman Sayak approving, Councilman Leonardis, Vice Mayor Spector, and Councilman Rennie opposed. We'll look for another motion, comments, or a question. Councilwoman Sayak.
Okay, then since that opposed, I'll go ahead and make an alternate motion. I move that we approve the housing element with 2 line item changes in Table 4. Proposed North 40 specific plan, the total be reduced to 270, and the changes within very low, low, and moderate, and above moderate be changed accordingly as well. And the Oak Rim North Blossom Hill AHAS site be removed to be replaced with the South Bay site, which is, I'm looking at, with 148 units, and again, having staff fill in the very low, low, and moderate.
Councilwoman Sayak, while they're discussing, did you want to include the recommendations from the HEAB and the Planning Commission?
Yes, I'd like to include those specific recommendations as
Okay,
well.
let's see if there's a second. Vice Mayor Spector.
Second.
Councilman Leonardis.
A question for the maker of the motion. So when we were doing the North 40 specific plan, we said 270 units plus the potential of a density bonus that could go up to 364 units, I think. So I don't know what number it will be, assuming that it's only 270, but it could be higher with the bonus. So I'm not sure what number works.
Unfortunately, we are not allowed to include density bonuses in our RENA calculations.
Okay,
We've
so-
looked at that alternative.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, any comments on the motion? Okay, I won't be supporting the motion for the reason that I stated in making the failed motion. Okay, so all in favor of the current motion?
Aye.
Aye, sorry. Okay, opposed? No. It passes 4-1 with the mayor opposing.
And then, Madam Mayor, may I just ask staff of process between now and the 31st?
Yes.
Well, we now have an adopted housing element, so that is the important milestone. That's what we need to have by May 31st. We will make the text revisions according to the motion and submit it to the state, and then they will go through their certification process, and we will explain how this is a simple replacement, that it does not affect the programs and action items.
And then if I may, a follow-up. Do we hear before the 31st whether or not that will be approved, or are we left? What happens?
I don't think the state has the same deadlines that we have, so hopefully they will get back to us promptly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that brings us to item number 11, mobile audio video system. Chief Frisbee, I assume.
Madam Mayor and Council, I promise to be brief. I know it's late. What I'd like to do is give you a brief synopsis of the proposed technology and give a general overview as to its functionality, its purpose, as well as a history of the department's involvement with video technology as it relates not only to in-car camera video, but also body-worn camera. As part of this presentation, obviously, I have included a copy of what the technology looks like in the cars. This is actually L3. You have some other pictures, I believe, in the original staff report, which is some of our existing equipment as well. But it basically lays out just as you see it there. With the two monitors, the officers have the ability up top to rewind and have different functionality on top, and then a larger screen in the middle. For purposes of explanation, you have a camera that faces to the front, as well as one that faces to the rear, and then you've got audio within the interior of the vehicle. So you can just use that or ask me any questions as I move through, but use that as a visual reference as I comment on some of the other functionality. As I mentioned, the police department has been using video technology in our police cars since 2007 and has had body-worn cameras since 2010. The current in-car camera technology has been scheduled for replacement since 2013, but due to staff bandwidth and competing interests, this project has not yet been accomplished. Near the time of my appointment, we identified this project as a critical need and placed a priority on completing the request for proposal process. After an in-depth review of 10 applicants and a competitive process, L3 Communications was selected as the preferred vendor. This new technology will afford us the opportunity to combine both body-worn video and in-car camera video, as well as other video and audio and media evidence such as digital still photos, surveillance photos, some of our interview room photos, on one platform and one server for the first time. Historically, we stored, searched, and collected all types of digital evidence on various servers and various platforms. This new technology will greatly improve our ability to quickly and efficiently categorize and consolidate all digital evidence. To review and analyze as well, and reduce the total number of items that have to be manually booked into evidence and sent to the DA's office or searched. So it will create a great efficiency there and workload relief for some of our intake and outtake and downloading with the officers. Additionally, this new technology comes with improved HD resolution and increased audio capacity. Obviously, as we know with our TVs and other types of video technology, they've increased a ton over the last 5-6 years, and they're changing all the time. So we're trying to keep up with what we consider to be best evidence. This system is designed to activate automatically when triggered by parameters set by the department. Those can be with speed. Crash sensors are included with this technology. We have lights and siren activations that automatically has the in-car camera video come on. L3 technology also provides the opportunity to have a 30-second pre-event recording. So if we do have a crash, if we do get into a pursuit, if we do make a car stop, or we go out with a suspicious vehicle, whatever occurred 60 seconds to actually that manual activation or trigger is also recorded. So that is a benefit and an upgrade from our prior system. The L3 technology also provides wireless download capacity so that officers, when they drive into the police operations building, that video automatically downloads to the server. So they don't have to come in, manually download, or pull from the trunk the audio evidence or the video evidence. Additionally, we're proposing to install cameras on the 2 motorcycles as well. In the past, we've only had them on the in-car and on the patrol vehicles, but we'd like to add and have included in this quote 2 cameras and audio recorders for both of our motor units. So that also would be an improvement. As I mentioned, for us, video and audio technology is something that we are very accustomed to and rely on heavily, while many other agencies are now just exploring the possibilities of video technology. We have had this technology for many years. Many times over the years, we've had the opportunity and the ability to use video evidence to assist us in prosecution of criminal cases, but also, and most effectively and accurately, conduct internal and external investigations that are brought through complaints. So this video technology in the cars and our body-worn gives us the best insight and the best evidence as to what our officers are doing on a daily basis and makes us be that much more professional. It is for all these reasons, coupled with the increased software complications that we have with the existing system, that I am proposing that we move forward with the recommendation for purchase and agreement with L3 Communications.
Thank you, Chief Frisbee. Are there questions? Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. Chief Frisbee, how do these communicate with other police agencies? Are these interoperable among, say, Sunnyvale PD or Santa Clara PD, or is it just proprietary? It's only us. Does that matter?
Yeah, they are not interoperable. Many of the other agencies don't have certain video technology, so this would be proprietary only to us. It does not interface with any of the other agencies.
All right, thank you.
Other questions? Vice Mayor Spector?
Thank you. Chief, in going through the staff report, I was not able to put my finger on how the equipment was going to be paid for, and because it seems like the report was saying different things in different places. So I'm looking at page 4 where it says fiscal impact. I don't know if you have that.
I do.
All right, so looking at that, can you tell me what amount of money you're requesting? Because I see there are 2 different, basically, line items. And so for each one, what the funding source is.
The amount of money that we're asking for is $125,000. I'll defer to Brenda, our administrative analyst, to give you the exact price of the system and explain some of those financial aspects for you.
Thank you.
Good evening. So the $125,000 is for the total project. $93,934 has been set aside in the equipment replacement fund that started, I believe, in 2007 when we installed the new system. They started the replacement fund schedule, and so those funds are available for us to use for the system. We requested $15,000 for the 2 motorcycles to be outfitted from the Los Gatos Monster Police Foundation, and that was approved by the Police Foundation on January 12th of this year. And then the MIS fund from the IT master plan in the amount of $16,066 was approved by IT, by Rumi, and that is for upgrading the storage capacity for the current server that we're going to be using, and also getting the Red Hat Linux software that is required for the L3 system.
You had one, you just mentioned 15,000, which I thought what you said was for the motorcycles, but do you have another police foundation 15,000 for the system itself?
No, it's how it's, I guess, listed in the fiscal impact is the $125,000 includes the $93,934, the $16,066 from IT, and then the $15,000 for the police foundation. And then the next item just shows that the $15,000 was approved by the police foundation for the motorcycles, and then that the master plan has the funding available for IT.
All right, thank you. And then one question for the chief. And this is basically, question is based on what I read in the newspapers and not so much what I know. But is there an issue, has anyone ever raised an issue with civil liberties when it comes to this kind of equipment? And seeing things and storing them, and it may be related to investigation, but maybe not. Has that ever come up? And if so, what's the response?
It hasn't come up with us. There are different policies that we have reviewed throughout the region that is specific to some of the HIPAA rights. As we go into hospitals, if we are in someone's home and there's an expectation of privacy, there's not an ongoing investigation. We have some issues with those with the body-worn cameras. Specific to the in-car camera videos, we haven't had any issues. There is a policy that outlines when they will be activated, when they won't be activated. So it is clearly regulated by the by the department and set up with manual, or not manual, automatic triggers to when it comes on and comes off. So we haven't had anything that has come to the police department that I can recall in the recent future, or the recent past. I apologize.
Recent past, I know this time of night,
Yeah,
past,
getting late.
future, who knows? Okay, thank you.
Councilman Rennie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Chief Frisbee, my question was really the same as Vice Mayor Spector. I was confused about the funding, and I think I understand the error. In where she took you on page 4, you mentioned coming from the Police Foundation, but on page 3 in the conclusion and in part C in the subject top, it says the general fund. So I assume that we don't even need part C as part of the motion, since it's coming from the Police Foundation and not the general fund.
I think the confusion on the general fund is that we have to match that amount in the replacement funds. And Jen has come back. But I think that's the confusion. I understand what you're saying. But in order to schedule for its replacement 6 years from now, we needed to value the entire system. So although there's $15,000 that comes from the Police Foundation, the total ask in the replacement amount will be based on that $125,000. So
Then we're going to end up with 15,000 extra. We'll end up with 140,000 instead.
Actually, Councilmember Rennie, I'm sorry if I can step in here. It's actually an accounting mechanism, so we hold the Police Foundation money in an account, and we just want to transfer it from that account into the expenditure account that this will hit. So it's more of an accounting mechanism than anything else.
So it's an account in the general fund?
Yes.
Okay, that was going to be part of my question, is where out of the general fund was it coming? But I guess you've answered that.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, I have a question for Chief Frisbee. It's kind of along the lines of the Vice Mayor, but not quite. When you were talking about the videos, you were talking about it in terms of evidence. So let's imagine you have a car stop that doesn't result in any kind of prosecution, so it's not evidence. How long do you keep that video, and what's your retention policy, and what's your privacy policy with respect to it?
per the government code, we keep that all video evidence for up to a year. We keep other video evidence specific to statute and crime specific if it goes to the district attorney's office for longer periods of time, depending on the type of evidence. But all video that is taken, body worn, and from the in-car camera video stays for minimally 1 year, at which time if it doesn't have an evidentiary value, it falls off, and it falls into our purge policy.
Okay, any other questions for the chief? Thank you very much. I don't have any other cards on the question of whether we ought to give the police department $125,000 for new car cameras. So I'm going to close the public portion of the hearing and look to the council for motion, questions, or comments. Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. I'm willing to make a motion that we authorize the interim town manager to execute the memorandum of agreement with level L3 Communications for the purchase of the mobile auto video system requested by the PD, not to exceed $125,000. And we go with B and C in the staff report as well. For brevity, that is my motion.
Is there a second? Councilman Rennie.
I'll second.
The motion's been made and seconded. Any comments or questions on the motion before I call the question? The maker of the motion has a comment on the motion.
Just want to say thank you to the Police Foundation for their contribution of $15,000.
Okay, I'm going to call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you, Chief Frisbee, for a comprehensive report and for giving us the alternatives. We appreciate that. Thank you. Now I'm going to look to the council. It's 10 of 10, which I normally wouldn't say is late for a council hearing. And I know that there's at least one person that wants to talk to us. I'm willing to go forward with the final item if everyone else is willing to go forward with it. Okay. So our final item is item number 12, which is proposing draft town code language for potential ordinance. I can't even talk anymore. For potential ordinances regarding alcoholic beverage service and entertainment to incorporate the recommendations, blah, blah, blah. Sorry. Mr. Paulson.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Council members. In 2011, the Town Council began discussing modifications to the alcohol beverage policy as it looked at the potential for an entertainment permit process. These topics were last discussed in October 2014, where the town council looked at the ad hoc committee's recommendations on updated alcohol beverage policy language, as well as a new entertainment permit process. Just for reference, current council member Leonardis and former council member Brzezinski were on that ad hoc committee. At that meeting, the town council directed staff to convert the potential policy language into code language. Staff has prepared draft code language for the council's consideration. Tonight, we're really looking for direction on both the alcohol service code language as well as the entertainment code language prior to going forward with an actual official town code amendment process, which would go back through the planning commission and then come back through to the town council for final adoption. The alcohol and beverage code language was initially submitted as attachment 3. A revised code language was submitted with the desk item as attachment 7 to clear up some typographical errors as well as some formatting errors. The staff prepared the draft language for the alcohol beverage service code language. There were some items that didn't really transfer well into code language from policy language, so staff added a purpose and intent section at the beginning of that to try to capture some of those elements. Additionally, as staff was going through the code revisions or code preparation, they found 2 items that we thought some further clarification could be better dealt with through another mechanism. And those 2 items are outlined in the staff report and generally deal with removing specific definitions for various types of alcohol beverage service businesses, and also incorporating a separate conditional use permit compliance review and enforcement section for CUPs for businesses that serve alcohol. The live entertainment code language is provided for in attachment 4. The ad hoc committee recommended that there be a separate permit process for entertainment that occurs after 10 p.m. That's reflected in the proposed code language. And currently, the permits for entertainment after 10 would go through the Planning Commission, and they would be the final deciding body unless that decision was appealed, and then, of course, it would come to the town council. There is an addendum for the item tonight, which was Economic Vitality Manager Monica Wren, who is here this evening as well, sent an email to businesses that have approval to serve alcoholic beverages, as well as the Chamber of Commerce. There was a letter sent, so that public comment was in the addendum. Additionally, there's the desk item, as mentioned before. There is the revised language for the alcohol beverage service code language that's in that, as well as some additional public comments. And lastly, there were some questions from council members that are addressed in that desk item. That concludes staff's report. Economic Vitality Manager Wren, Ms. Pravetti, and Mr. Schultz, who have been key players in the development of these code modifications, are here for questions, and we're available.
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. Questions? Councilman Rennie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I asked questions 1 through 4, and number 1 looks like, so what I was really asking about was adding entertainment and what would it cost somebody to add entertainment, not really add alcohol. And I think 1 talks about entertainment, but specifically number 3 is my concern is you put in amounts for what it would cost somebody to modify their CUP, but it looks like it's all talking about alcohol and not entertainment. My concern is, let's say an independent coffee shop in town wants to add, live music till 10 o'clock. What's it going to cost them?
So I'd offer, referring back to item number 1, which was one of your questions, there are approximately 35, as referenced in the desk item, CUPs that specifically say live entertainment's not permitted. So if someone wanted to come through and be allowed to have either live entertainment prior to 10 p.m. or after 10 p.m., a modification of the use permit would be required. So item 3, whether it's to add alcohol or to add the provision for entertainment, those prices are the same. Either way, it's a modification of the use permit. understanding that there's obviously concern about the cost of going through that process. I think there's public comment that deals with that as well. Staff's, I think, provided some, options to look at other mechanisms to try to deal with that in a expeditious and cost-effective manner.
Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You just mentioned the CUP modification to have entertainment after 10. And in looking to both of your staff reports relating to alcohol and to entertainment, there is regular reference to after 10. So am I to understand from your staff reports that there is no control on entertainment before 10?
So I would defer to Mr. Schultz if I don't have the answer, but the current language is for a permit process for entertainment after 10. Entertainment before 10 would be a permitted use. And so there are accompanying modifications that address that. So the language as written currently would not restrict entertainment prior to 10.
So if I were a store or a coffee shop that wanted to have music before 10 p.m., I could just do it?
As currently drafted, yes.
Thank you.
And I'll make
Mr.
that
Schultz?
caveat, that's correct, except for those 35 that specifically said no entertainment was to be allowed.
That's CUPs.
If their CUP specifically said no entertainment is allowed, and I think the example is a coffee shop, they would not be able to do entertainment until they got a CUP modification that said they could have it even before 10 p.m. That might be a coffee shop that maybe they have people living right above it, and even up to 10 p.m. is not okay.
But up to 10 p.m. without a CUP that has that prohibition, or if there were no CUP, then there would be no control on entertainment until 10 p.m.
Correct. If the CUP is silent, if the coffee shop didn't say anything about whether entertainment was not allowed, then they could have it up to 10 p.m. without going through any permit requirement.
Or if they didn't have a CUP at all.
Correct.
Thank you.
I'm going to actually want to follow up on that. So my question is actually going, I think, in the opposite direction of Vice Mayor Spector. So if the council were to adopt any of these things that are proposed, the way I read them is, if you want to have entertainment after 10 o'clock, you have to get a CUP. If you want to have entertainment before 10 o'clock, that's fine. So why wouldn't, if that were adopted, that retroactively negate any condition in a CUP that says no live entertainment? And why would we make the people come in and pay a fee to get told there's no regulation on it?
Because staff looked at, and that's something that we can do and look into and do that as a separate item, but there, and notice requirements, because a CUP is specific for that business, and there might have been a specific reason why entertainment wasn't allowed that might have issues related to that business even before 10 p.m. And so we'd want to look at those even closer. If it specifically stated no entertainment at all, there might have been a reason for that, to just blanketly say, let's remove them all. And that's what our concern was, at least. Those should be looked at a little bit closer.
Okay, an additional follow-up, then I'll call on the other people. I know, because I participated in the approval of many of them, there are CUPs out there that say you can't have entertainment pending the town council's adoption of a entertainment policy. What happens with those CUPs?
So in those cases, now that we have one adopted, they just have to comply with it. So if they were going to do entertainment before 10 p.m., then they're treated like everybody else, because it didn't have a specific no entertainment. It just says you must comply with the entertainment permit process. If they were going to do it before 10 p.m., no permit would be necessary. If it was after, they would need that permit.
Okay, Councilwoman Sayak.
Thank you. Following along those lines, on the desk item number 2, it says current town code would require modifications to be approved by the original approving body, but then it gives an alternative that we could make modifications so that at a minimum the DRC could make those modifications. And the reason it was brought down to the DRC, one, was the cost would be much lower to the applicant, but is that because it requires a public hearing And the DRC is the only other mechanism beside a planning commission and council that has a public hearing? Okay. Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Okay, I'm going to call, thank you very much, Mr. Paulson. Mr. Arzi.
Wow. You know, this almost didn't get started. This was a staff-driven project. Council didn't ask for it. Staff asked for it. I was here on the 11th in 2011, and questioned heavily staff, saying, who asked for this? Numerous people came before us and asked us for this, Mr. Arzi. 2 people? 4 people? Well, numerous. We don't need this policy. Even Mr. Brzezinski was upset about it, even though he ended up on the committee. You know, I believe strongly that the entertainment and alcohol policies need to be tied to parking. Back in the 1970s, the town issued a sundown law rendering all occupancy permits invalid unless we, in the Central Business District, established more parking. Section 2928, 181, 2930, and 310 clearly allows for this if health, safety, and welfare are evident. Our infrastructure lacks parking, and loss of mom and pop business clearly is a welfare problem. They're going out of business. Intensification of the CBD without considering parking or following the parking district regulations has taken away from our so-called unique character, so cherished by our residents. Conditional use permits have increased CBD property values and priced small retail out of business. A lot of our established restaurants are suffering still, not returning to their pre-Great Recession levels. There is not one mention of adhering to the parking regulations without exceptions. That's what we have parking regulations for. We have alternative regulations to take care of this problem that staff is creating for us. Not one mention of allowing retail to convert to restaurant use is in this so-called plan. Not one mention of parking. From my perspective, this new ordinance promotes more intensification rather than following existing regulations to the letter, making it easier for entertainment and alcohol to survive without parking making it easier for entertainment and alcohol to survive without parking should not be the outcome of this exercise. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arzi. Jessica Lamarck.
Madam Mayor and members of the Town Council, my name is Jessica Lamack, and I'm here on behalf of the Los Gatos members of the California Restaurant Association. I'm going to make my comments really brief. My members and your constituents are still reviewing this draft ordinance, and they have not gotten back to me on how this would affect them. But I can tell you that the issue of CUPs and permits are very, very important to them, and I know that they will have some comments. So we look forward to working with everyone here as well as staff as this measure moves through the process. As I said, it is very, very important to them. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, you have a question. Hang on a second. Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you. Ms. Lamarck, how many members are in your association that you're representing? How many restaurant owners?
Oh, so we're a statewide association. There's
Okay.
about 85,000 restaurants within the state of California, and we represent nearly half of those. Within the town of Los Gatos, we have about 20-ish.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, other questions? Anyone else want to talk to us about this? Okay, seeing no one, I'm going to close the public portion of the hearing. I think we've asked our questions of staff, and I'm just going to actually take this opportunity to seize the bully pulpit, make my speech, and then people can determine what they're going to do after I make my speech. So we had an appeal on one of the homes at the Highlands, and I looked at the Planning Commission transcript about it, and I was reading the entire transcript, and I came across a comment of Commissioner O'Donnell, believe it or not, because often he and I don't necessarily agree. However, his comment on this was very apropos. And so I pulled it out, and it's having to do with a different matter, but he says, I just want to make a comment that a number of the comments made by the appellant relate to enforcement. It seems to me, which is not before us tonight, and that's nothing we have any control over. But I would agree that perhaps if in fact our present existing laws and guidelines are not being observed, that's an enforcement problem. I'm not sure how you solve that problem by simply passing tonight more of the same things if we're not presently enforcing what we have. So given his comments, which I agree with, I am very much opposed to us passing those items that were before us tonight. I voted against them previously. I'll vote against them again. But we have been struggling, for example, with the North 40 to craft all kinds of regulations on a development that doesn't exist to make sure that it doesn't compete with our downtown. Yet we're considering tonight loading ordinances onto our downtown that hamper its competition with not only other places in Los Gatos, but with other municipalities in this area. And if we want our downtown to be viable, if we want it to be competitive, if we want it to be able to offer what's offered elsewhere, if we want to do what Ms. Callaway was telling us to do, to encourage people to come in and shop at our brick and mortar places, we need to have a reason for them to come. And right now, if I think about my little paradigm, what are the things I need to show up for in life right now? Well, I need to show up for these meetings, but I need to show up to eat. I need to show up to drink. Someone pointed out, I think it was Mr. Arzi, I need to show up to try on a wedding dress, but I'm done with that, so I don't need to do that anymore. And I need to show up to a doctor appointment, but I don't need to show up to shop. I don't need to show up, to go downtown unless if there's something that's going to attract me there. And what's going to attract me there are amenities that are offered in the downtown, which if I were to be in a position to vote to adopt these, I would be squelching. And I don't want to put regulation onto our downtown when I'm struggling in another context to make it competitive. And I think these would make it non-competitive. And the fact is, the only reason we're considering an entertainment ordinance is that our existing policy adopted in 2001 said, and you can have entertainment in compliance with a policy to be adopted later. Okay, so now we're adopting their policy later, 14 years later. But what have we done to address those things that people say that they care about with respect to this kind of use? They say, well, it can be noisy, things are loud, people don't behave themselves, so you really have to do something. That's, as Commissioner O'Donnell said, that's an enforcement problem. We just hired a code enforcement person. We just put stuff in place to make sure on our website and everything else that people can be responsive. And I know that I've talked to business owners and I've said, you've got to be out there and be responsive. And I know that some of them are promising to do that and that they're making an effort to do that. We don't have a lot of people coming in pounding their fists tonight. I know it's late and Cinco de Mayo and saying, that enforcement effort hasn't worked. You really need to crack down on this. So if I look at what's being proposed, the proposed alcohol ordinance is really mimicking what's in our existing policy, number one. Number two, if I look at the entire entertainment structure, it's really done to comply with our 2001 policy. But really what it's saying is, if you want to have entertainment after 10 p.m., you need to have a CUP. Okay, that seems somewhat reasonable, but I can incorporate all of that into our existing policy, and I know that there's some argument to have an ordinance, not a policy, and I get that, but we could convert our existing policy to an ordinance, keep it exactly the same, and just add provide entertainment past 10 p.m. or alcohol service or entertainment. We have a whole enforcement structure in place. We have all kinds of things in place. So I would be just adamantly opposed and prepared to make a motion that we not adopt these proposed ordinances tonight, but that's my speech, and I won't make a motion yet, but I'll look to others for comments, questions, or a motion. Yes.
So I just wanted to clarify, there's no adoption that would happen. This isn't even an introduction. It would just be the motion would be not to send it on to the planning commission or
Yeah.
further direction. Okay.
So I just want to make it clear that I don't want this to go any farther. Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. I'm trying to go back in time and remember the origin of why we formed the ad hoc committee. It seemed like when I got elected to council in 2010, there was this discussion about trying to update the alcohol and entertainment policy. And for so many years, we had this similar discussion as you just raised the points, that the current policy seems to be fine. But then there were folks coming from the community or whatever who wanted to have the ability to have some entertainment before 10 p.m. And then we talked about, is it amplified? Is it non-amplified? Should we have a separate entertainment permit? Should we, change the alcohol and entertainment policy and all these kinds of things? What I'm seeing this evening is an underwhelming response from the public. We had the speaker come forward and say that they represent 20 restaurant owners in town, and they're not here this evening. And we had a couple letters. Another gentleman said it's Cinco de Mayo, and he's not sure what we're doing, and he wishes he could be here, but he can't because it's Cinco de Mayo. And then another person said that they weren't head over heels for the policy either. Then we had another speaker talk about parking and some other things. So being that I was on the ad hoc committee and I helped get this to where it is, I'm at least inclined at this point to either continue this for more members of the public to come forward and speak on it, or I don't know. I don't have any convictions of adopting anything this evening is where I am. So.
Mr. Schultz.
I wanted to give you a little bit of history because I was part of that ad hoc, and one of the scenarios that isn't mentioned is the businesses that have a CUP that it's silent. It doesn't say you can or can't have entertainment. And if it's silent, that means you would need a modification. So that was one of the ones we were alleviating, is all those above the 35 that says you count, ones that are silent, if they were having any entertainment, staff's position is you needed a modification of your CUP. You had to come in and spend all that money. So part of the ad hocs was to alleviate that. That's why they used that before 10 p.m., if you were silent on it, you could now do it. So that was one of the requirements we were trying to ease up, not increase restrictions, but ease it up before the 10. And that was I believe a large percentage of them are just silent on it. And for us, that meant if it's not allowed as a use, you need to come in and get a modification. And I think that was some of the complaints we heard on some of the enforcement.
Okay. Other comments or questions? Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is another issue that we've worked on for a long time. In fact, somewhat irrelevant. When I was preparing for the meeting, and there was the issue about the home on the hillside and whether it was visible or not, somebody said, well, you need to go back to 2005, Dr. Wiseman. You have to go back to a 2005 council meeting. So I tried to get back to the 2005 council meeting, and I saw the minutes, and guess what we were discussing? The alcohol and entertainment policy. But having said that, this issue over the years causes a lot of challenges because on the one hand, you have these competing interests. And the mayor was talking about individuals showing up or going downtown. But some of us or some of the people are already here. And those are the competing interests that you have. The business owners will say, we want entertainment, we want expanded liquor use because it brings economic vitality to downtown. It brings economic vitality, increased revenue to us. On the other hand, you have the people who are here, who live here. And for them, not having entertainment before 10 p.m., What can that affect? The noise when they're trying to work at home, the noise when they're trying to put their children to bed, the noise when they're watching television. Does that occur before 10 p.m.? Yes, that occurs before 10 p.m. And then for the late night, when you have increased liquor use and entertainment, then late at night you have the individuals walking back to their cars, I'm assuming, and they're vomiting, urinating on your yard, and kicking your fence. And so these are the issues that are competing. These are the issues that concern me because the ordinances as drafted do not address these issues, and because in some ways they are going to make them worse, I'm not going to be able to support these proposals either.
Okay, so I'm going to actually try a motion. Thank you, Vice Mayor. And some of the things the Vice Mayor is pointing out, that what we've been trying to do on the policy committee, which was not in existence when we started the discussion of these things that we have in front of us, was to try to tackle old policies, figure out whether they made sense, whether they didn't make sense, whether they were serving the town, whether they were not serving the town. Because we were far along this railroad, the policy committee did not consider this. It's a perfect thing for the policy committee to consider, given the discussions that have taken place tonight and the input that we've received. And so my motion would be for us to send this specifically to our policy committee to consider those factors that the Vice Mayor has brought up, the factors that I have brought up, and decide how we want to change our existing policy, if we want to change it, whether we want to codify it, whether we don't want to codify it, and how that should take place, and ask that the policy committee put that on an expedited program. And I'm going to make this motion because I know I'm part of it and we have to do the work, but that's my motion. Vice Mayor Spector.
Because the policy committee doesn't have enough to do, I'm going to second your motion.
We don't have enough to do. Any discussion on the motion? Councilwoman Sayak.
Thank you. I will be supporting the motion. Definitely one of the benefits, I thought, of looking at it was there was an attempt in my mind to try and simplify. And I like that overall intent of trying to simplify and trying to make the policy somewhat simpler and consistent with existing codes and ordinances. But I do want to mention a couple of things since you will be looking at it at the policy committee. I was actually one of those on the planning commission that had asked for these revisions because there were several nuances that were not clear. Retail conversion to restaurant, if the existing policy specifically says to discourage, but there were examples while I was on planning commission where we have hybrids now of pseudo restaurant, pseudo retail, and what did we do with that? There was also the discussion of parking because your traditional restaurant ratio of seats to parking is not necessarily going to be the same as one that's more of a wine bar. So those were issues that the existing policy did not even mention. And definitions needed updating. There were no such thing as a wine bar back then, and the definition of people sitting at a bar was strictly prohibited, whereas that's more in line with today's dining etiquette. So a refresher and update certainly is one that I think is as much needed.
Okay, so I'm just going to comment on your questions or comments. Because the policy committee doesn't have enough to do, the policy committee actually is looking at all of those questions as they arise in separate things. So we're going through land use policies, we're going through specialty retail, we're going through all those things that you are now discussing, and as they get ready, we're intending to bring them back to the council. But thank you for your comments. Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. I will be supporting the motion, although I do think the next incarnation of the alcohol entertainment policy, whatever that might be, this incarnation was not done in vain. I appreciate the work that the staff has done and the Planning Commission has done and the ad hoc committee, as well as the points that Mr. Schultz brought up. It made us think, but again, I don't see anybody from the public beating down our door wanting this thing, and that concerns me. I mean, we haven't heard much other than, an underwhelming support of don't do it or we're not sure. So I'm glad that it will be picked up and brought forward by the policy committee.
Before I call the question, I should also say that we have also a new, and Vice Mayor Spector, you get to do this too, ad hoc committee on infrastructure, which is considering parking issues and downtown issues. So those will be taken up in that context as well. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to return this to the policy committee and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It passes 4-1. Councilman Rennie opposed. I'm sorry? What? We're done. Meeting's adjourned.